For the record, my name is Henry Santana, at-large City Councilor, and I am the Chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice. Today is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live-streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcasted on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Files Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.ps@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you are interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance of the chamber. If you are looking to testify virtually, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Shane Pack, at shane.pack@boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on 11 public safety grants, 8 administered by the Boston Police Department and 3 administered by the Office of Emergency Management. I will now read the dockets into the record, and then we'll explain how we'll be dividing up the grants today for 3 panels of the testimony on behalf of the administration. Docket number 1545, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $307,304 in the form of a grant for the FY25 DMH CIT TTAC grant awarded by the MA Department of Mental Health to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund the implementation of 40-hour Crisis Intervention Team CIT training for officers under the umbrella of the BPD Street Outreach Unit. Docket number 1546, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $280,065 in the form of a grant for the FY24 DNA Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Program, awarded by the United States Department of Justice to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund 2 criminalist positions, overtime, lab supplies, equipment, and continuing education expenses. Docket number 1548, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $29,496 in the form of a grant for the FY24 Port Security Grant Program awarded by the United States Department of Homeland Security to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund the purchase of new collar for the 38 Safe Boat Duty vessel. These 3 matters were sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu and referred to the committee on October 23, 2024. Docket number 1622, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $56,890.04 in the form of a grant for the FY25 Municipal Road Safety Grant awarded by the United States Department of Transportation, passed through the MA Executive Office of Safety and Security to be administered by the Police Department. The grant would fund high visibility traffic enforcement of motor vehicle laws, including but not limiting to speeding and aggressive driving, distracted driving, impaired driving, and occupant protection, as well as traffic safety equipment. This matter was sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu and referred to the committee on October 30th, 2024. Docket number 1673, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $11,952,986 in the form of a grant for the FY 2024 Urban Area Security Initiative awarded by the United States Department of Homeland Security, passed through the MA Executive Office of Public Safety and Security to be administered by the Mayor's Office of Emergency Preparedness. The grant will fund the enhancement of regional preparedness and capabilities in designated high-threat, high-density areas. Docket number 1675, Message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $2,305,847 in the form of a grant for the FY24 Regional Preparedness Grant awarded by the United States Department of Homeland Security, passed through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to be administered by the Mayor's Office of Emergency Preparedness. The grant will fund regional planning efforts to manage catastrophic incidents, including extreme weather events and their impact. Docket number 1676, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expand the amount of $1 million in the form of a grant for the Securing the City's Continuation Grant awarded by the United States Department of Homeland Security to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund continued enhancements for regional capabilities to detect, identify, report, and interdict nuclear and other radioactive materials out of the regulatory control and provide regional training and exercise opportunities necessary to enhance regional capabilities. Docket number 1680, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $110,000 in the form of a grant for the FY25 DMH Co-Response Grant awarded by the MA Department of Mental Health and to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund 2 full-time recovery coaches through BEST and provide training to officers. Docket number 1681, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $100,000 in the form of a grant for the FY25 DMH Training Grant awarded by the MA Department of Mental Health to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund to reimburse overtime costs to backfill crisis intervention team training and other mental health trainings for officers. These 5 matters were sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu and referred to the committee on November 20th, 2024. And lastly, docket number 1770, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $80,000 in the form of a grant for the Federal Burn Justice Assistance Program awarded by the United States Department of Justice, passed through the MA Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, and to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund the annual Boston address verification procedures mandated by the Massachusetts Sex Offender Registry Board. Docket number 1772, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $71,335 in the form of a grant for the Federal FY24 Emergency Management Performance Agency to be administered by the Office of Emergency Preparedness. The grant will fund the enhancement of operational capacity at the Boston Emergency Operations Center and promote the professional development of the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. These final 2 matters were sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu and referred to the committee on December 4th, 2024. Today, I am joined by my colleagues in order of arrival: Councillor Ed Flynn, Councillor Erin Murphy, Councillor Liz Braden, Councillor John Fitzgerald, and Councillor Ben Weber. We've also been joined by City Council President Ruth Jen. We also received letters of absence from Councillor Enrique Pepin, from Councillor Brian Worrell, and from Councillor Sharon Durkin. Before we begin, I'd like to just ask folks to please silence their phones and devices. As we have a lot of grants to cover, and I'm sure my colleagues are interested to hear testimony from the 3 separate panels testifying on behalf of the administration, and will want to have ample time to ask each of the panel's questions, we're going to move directly to our first of 3 panels, and will provide time for my colleagues to offer both remarks and ask questions at the time as we go. At this time, I'd like to provide an overview of the first set of 4 dockets that we'll be reviewing, along with the panelists the committee invited to testify on behalf of the administration on these dockets. and for the members of the Boston Police Department and administration who are here to testify today, I kindly ask that you only be seated at the panelist table right now if you are testifying on these specific 4 dockets. Our first panel will be on dockets number 1545, dockets 1680, dockets 1681, and dockets 1622. For dockets 1545, 1680, and 1681, the committee invited Lieutenant Peter Messina, Street Outreach Unit, Boston Police Department; Jenna Savage, Office of Research and Development with the Boston Police Department. And for docket number 1622, the committee invited Superintendent Lanita Kulane, Bureau of Field Services with the Boston Police Department. For the panelists who are here today, I'd like each of you to just state your name and title for the record. And once everyone has introduced themselves, we'll move to opening remarks. All right, we're having some technical difficulties, so we'll just give it a minute. We'll just be in a quick recess as we're having some technical difficulties. Thank you. We're back in session, so I think we are good to go. So I'll turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Jenna Savage. I'm the Deputy Director of the Boston Police Department Office of Research and Development.
Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Peter Messina, Street Outreach Unit.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Lanita Cullinane. I'm a superintendent with the Boston Police Department, and I oversee the Bureau of Field Services.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite our panelists to please proceed with opening remarks. I kindly just ask that in order to allow times for counselors' questions and discussion, that you please limit your opening remarks to 5 minutes per grant. With that, please proceed with the opening remarks, beginning with the 3 grants related to DMH dockets number 1545, 1680, and 1681, and then dockets number 1622 for the FY25 municipal road safety.
Absolutely. So I'm going to do those first 3, the 1545, 1680, and 1681. I'm going to do the actual testimony, but Lieutenant Messina is here to answer any questions that I can't answer. The 3 grants are all from the Massachusetts State Department of Mental Health. We get them every year. The big one is obviously the CIT TTAC, which stands for the Crisis Intervention Team Training and Technical Assistance Center. The BPD is really excited to have their own training center that initially launched its first class, I believe, in May of 2022. It's a 40-hour mental health training for officers, and not just for BPD, but we always save seats for external first responders, be they anyone who, hospital, security, Mass State Police, you name it, anyone who's responding in the city of Boston who would really benefit from not only learning how to recognize symptoms of mental illness and substance disorder, but also knowing about local resources, learning how to de-escalate. It's a really great training that we're super proud of. And so this grant supports a full-time CIT training coordinator who is a civilian who is based out of the Street Outreach Unit. Also supports overtime for officers to help teach the classes, because it's a huge week-long effort. It includes travel to the annual CIT training conference and usually the co-responder conference as well. Food and drink during the training. Presenters sometimes need to get paid to come in, various supplies, obviously, just for doing trainings. And if you want more answers or more information about the training itself, it's very comprehensive and it's really great. We've trained over 230 officers so far at the BPD. So that is docket 1545, which relates directly. I'll just skip over to 1681, which is really simple. That's just backfill. So for officers who are attending the training, this grant will provide backfill so that someone can cover for them while they're at the training. So that's all that money is for. And then finally, the 3rd grant, 1680, which is our co-response grant. We're using that to support one, it's supposed to be 2 positions initially, but DMH had some severe budget cuts this year, so they ended up changing our award. So now we're going to be able to hire 1 recovery coach. We had one, but they actually left to take a different position with the city. So we're going to be hiring 1 recovery coach who will work directly at our hub tables, work with the street outreach unit, and the recovery coach just plays a really important role helping people navigate the system. They're people who have lived experience with substance use, with the criminal justice system, and really help them kind of navigate the system from a really personal point of view. And so we're really excited to have that position back.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything?
Recovering the,
Questions?
Just one thing I do want to add that was left out. We do train EMS as well, so if we have open seats at our CAT TTAC training, we do offer it up to EMS as well. So they train alongside the officers who are students in the class, and we have found it to be very effective so far.
Thank you. I'll be testifying relative to docket 1622, the Municipal Road Safety Grant. And the Boston Police Department is committed to enhancing the safety of motor vehicle operators, pedestrians, and cyclists as a key component within the overall community policing mission. For mobilization activities, our desired impact would be to reduce collision and violation incidents in all 3 categories of motor vehicle traffic safety enforcement, which include impaired driving, distracted driving, as well as speeding, as well as pedestrian and bike enforcement. We will do this through overtime funds for officers to utilize and participate in planned mobilizations, and through the utilization of pole-mounted radar speed signs, which will include all of the hardware for those signs, as well as a subscription. To deploy Boston police officers to participate in all traffic mobilizations convened by mass EOPS is to reduce motor vehicle violations and all the focus strategies by 5%. We will deploy Boston police officers to participate in all pedestrian and bicycle safety mobilizations as well, with a 5% reduction as our goal, and we'll be purchasing those 3 pole-mounted speed signs that will also support those activities. We did do an assessment as a part of the grant to look at the different areas where we are having issues around some of the identified components of the municipal road safety grants. And so we looked at total number of crashes, those with injuries, bicycle-involved accidents, as well as pedestrian-involved accidents. And that's how we decided on those areas of focus, which doesn't mean that we won't focus on other areas, but specific to this grant, we use this particular information.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those remarks. At this time, I'll turn it over now to my council colleagues in order of arrival for councilor questions, starting with Councilor Ed Flynn. You have the floor. And, oh, sorry, I didn't mention the amount of time. So we're going to give 5 minutes per councilors, and then if a second round is needed, we'll do that. So we're going to do 5 minutes per councilor. Councilor Ed Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to Lieutenant Superintendent and Jenna for being here, for your leadership. I know there's several other grants that haven't been discussed yet that are part of this hearing. But Superintendent, one of the issues I've worked on for a long period of time is the Boston Police Crime Lab. Are you able to give me an update on exactly what's happening today at the Crime Lab?
The Crime Lab does not fall under the Bureau of Field Services, so I'm going to leave that to the people that have more information relative to that.
Okay. Jenna, are you able to respond about anything relating to the Crime Lab?
I am not, I'm sorry.
Lieutenant?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. So, Superintendent, you're here on traffic enforcement related issues and pedestrian safety related issues. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Superintendent, have we noticed any increase in response time from police, fire, or EMS as it relates to emergency vehicles getting to hospitals in Boston because of the ongoing traffic or construction or for whatever reason?
I don't have any information relative to that.
Okay. Lieutenant?
No, likewise, I don't have any information regarding that.
Jenna?
No, sorry.
Okay. Do we know if there have been any first responders that have been stuck in traffic trying to get to an emergency because of the traffic? Do we have any idea if that's accurate?
I don't have information relative to that today.
Lieutenant?
No, nor do I.
Have you,
I do not.
in your experience, have you ever witnessed that?
I don't have any info. I can't answer that right now. I don't have information relative to that.
Likewise.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I have no questions.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Chair, thank you, panelists, for being here. On the dockets, Lieutenant and Jenna, is the 110 co-response that one position?
Yes.
Yeah, could you just speak a little bit more? And you said there was someone in that position. Was that the first person? Was this like a new position? We hired one person, but
We,
for whatever reason, they moved on, but,
Yes, they took a great position with the city.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good.
But, and we were very sad to lose her. So we did have someone in this position. We had her for a full year, I believe, before. And we had just gotten permission to also hire her second person. And then just as we were getting the renewal of the grant, we lost the first person, and then we lost the funding for a second person. So we were basically filling an existing position that has already worked out very well.
so we thought we'd have funding to
Continue one
hold,
person.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then we're back to one?
Yes.
And have we filled that?
We were very close to filling it. The person who left had recommended someone, but then we actually lost that person to the city as well at the last second. So we are now reposting it.
Okay, and could you just touch on the great work the former person did?
Oh my
A
gosh.
few, yeah, like what were the things that she was
Yeah.
focused on that helped support this work?
And Lieutenant Messina might be able to speak to it better, but I just know that they especially, she could only be in so many places at one time. We really needed 10 of her, and so she became very, very close with District B2, with Roxbury. So I know she was heavily involved with helping with people in that station, with helping officers who were just, interacting with people out in the streets, helping them get connected to the resources they need. And I know she was very heavily involved in our hub tables. Again, we're just super sad to see her go, but really excited for her in this new position. But do you want to add anything to that, Lieutenant?
No, she was fantastic in the role, and definitely recovery coaches are an important element to have off Boston police officers. A lot of these officers, I mean, we're getting them trained up on CIT training, but a lot of officers, I mean, we've had 230 officers go through the CIT training to date. We're trying to obviously increase that. We would like every officer going through CIT training, but having a recovery coach available to the officers on the street to assist with Section 35s, voluntary treatment is very important.
And it makes sense that it was B2 at that time. We had a hearing a few weeks ago, specifically to the crime and the concerns in the downtown area. And at that hearing, and in many conversations we're having, is, we knew that Atkins Street wasn't the only location, but now that we know that those concerns are spread out over the city, is there enough resources? Like, do other districts, not just B2, need someone like this to support them, knowing that those concerns are spread out now?
They're definitely spread out, and it's important. That's why it's important to hire these two positions. I mean, having, this would allow us to really break the city in half, essentially, having one of them handle one section and one of them handle the other, so.
Is two enough? I know the grant covers it. Is it something you would want to see, like, in the budget season coming up, to expand that we have people on our own city payroll that's funding these positions?
Yes, so ideally, in an ideal world, we have right now, I guess what we're coming up with, hopefully 5 hubs. There'd be one assigned to each hub, so one assigned to each area, so a total of 5 would be perfect.
I would just add, I guess, a couple of things. One is that, yes, we are actually currently working on our FY26 budget request, and I literally just sent you an email earlier today to say, what do we want to try and ask for? So I think it's actually a great suggestion to maybe add some permanent recovery coach positions.
'Cause I know you guys do a great job with your grants, but if
Yep.
the funding ends and it's a position that we know is
Absolutely.
supportive to our police officers and EMS and
Absolutely,
first
and we
responders.
can't thank this body enough for supporting us and getting our permanent funding for the best clinicians, for the co-response clinicians. I will add, there are other recovery coaches working in the area that aren't BPD employees. One of our other grants that actually does come through the BPD is the Services Over Sentences grant, and that supports 2 recovery coaches specifically dedicated to working where they're most needed, which was Mass and Cass, but I think they're being more movable, and they're hired through North Suffolk Community Services. So we do have other recovery coaches working in the area, they're just not necessarily paid directly through
Yeah,
BPD.
okay. And to traffic, before my time runs out, you mentioned that this would fund 3 pole-mounted speed signs. Where are they going to be located, and do we have some already, and where are they in the city?
We have not determined where they're going to be located. We make use of the ones that the city actually puts into place, and so I had some conversations with them. So we'll speak with them as well to
And is
figure out
that the
what the best.
transportation
The
department? Yeah, because
transportation
when you were
department, yes.
talking, I was
That's correct.
wondering, wouldn't this be through the transportation department, but this grant comes through the police department?
Yes, but we have had conversations with them and we'll figure out where the
Okay,
best
you'll work.
locations are. based
And I
on-
know my time's going to run out, but when you mentioned that funded, other recovery coaches, does the Public Health Commission or others help support these roles that the police are expected, or?
I can't say what they have, I mean, I'm sure they have their own folks working with their
Okay.
team. I'm not sure, yeah, I'm sure they all coordinate in some way. I'm not on the ground with that, though.
All right,
So I'm not
awesome.
sure how
Thank
they
you.
work together,
Thank you,
yeah.
Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Braden, you have the floor.
Come on. Got it. Thank you. Thanks for being here this afternoon. I'm interested in docket 1622, the road safety one. I like the idea that the pole-mounted speed guides are really helpful. I think instant feedback about how fast you're going is always good. Do you folks coordinate with BTD about sort of the most, how do you decide the location? Do you work with BTD on that, or is it?
So we will work with them on that, and we will take the information that we have that's relative to areas where we have been seeing the most incidents, and then figure out where we should put them.
Uh-huh. And so how many did you say we had to deploy, new ones?
3,
Just 3?
just 3.
And what sort of price tag do those have?
They were each $3,199.
Okay, times 3, okay.
Yes.
We'll get really excited. We'll fight over the 3. I could do with 3 for all of District 9, never mind the whole city. That's wonderful. So just out of an idea, how many do we have across the city?
I would have to get back to you with that information.
Okay. The other issue I had, and I just saw it again today, was, the whole issue around e-bikes and scooters. Like, they're a total menace on the road sometimes when they don't observe the rules of the road. I saw one coming through a red light on the wrong side of the road this morning, riding through crosswalks and missing or hitting pedestrians, and then, just being general nuisance almost. What's the sort of, will this grant be able to help address some of those issues? I know it's been a big problem around scooters and e-bikes that are delivering food deliveries and stuff like that, but these are just ordinary folks as well.
Yes, there's specific enforcement mobilizations that directly focus on pedestrian and bicycles enforcement and safety. So yes, and there's speeding, and there's other elements that we'll be focusing on throughout the year, but it definitely does have an aspect that focuses on bicycles.
Yeah. I think the other issue we see in our district is a lot of folks using the Waze app, that they cut through residential streets and they really go at a fair clip. Is there any insights into how we can manage that? Like, we've been talking about this for a long time, because they're trying to save time on their commute, but they're driving recklessly through, away from the main drag where you would maybe have more enforcement. But is there anything that we can do to sort of address some of that stuff?
I think there are aspects, because that would be considered distracted driving, which falls under this grant, and so there are specific things that we could talk about and strategize to address some of those things that lead to distracted driving. I think sometimes the placement of, a phone in a car, and you're not, there are laws that prohibit you from holding a phone in your hand when you're operating, and those are some of the things when we talk about distracted driving and enforcing those specific laws relative to that type of situation.
Very good. And then with regard to the best, which docket, there's a lot of dockets here.
1680 and 1681. are the two
1681,
ones.
1680.
Oh, sorry, 1545.
We're really pleased with how we've been adding more best practitioners. How many do we have at this point?
I believe we have 14 full-time positions.
14. Does that mean there's someone in every precinct?
We have a couple of vacancies right now, and actually, I guess that it also includes someone who's with the school engagement unit, and it also includes at least one supervisor position, because when you get that many clinicians, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So right now, I believe we're about to lose,
3 vacancies,
I think we've got 3, we're literally losing someone, really unfortunately.
Which will be 4.
So we'll have four vacancies.
4 vacancies.
Yeah, which is the most we've had. We actually just had the highest, for the past year, we actually had a really good roster. It was pretty stable. It's like longest it's stayed that stable for so long.
And has the best clinician program been beneficial?
Incredibly.
Yeah.
And, for me personally, what's really exciting is when I go to we have these community comm stats now, and at multiple ones, I've just kind of sat in the background and I've heard at least 2 captains say that they think that getting best clinicians is the best thing the BPD has ever done. It gives such confidence that the officers are responding to mental health calls, feeling so much more comfortable, knowing they've got the tools in their tool belt, knowing that they'll be able to get people referred to services, hopefully prevent future calls. I think it has really just taken hold of the way we police.
Yeah, because very often it's not a law enforcement issue, it's more of a severe mental health issue.
But the reality is that police are often the first to respond, whether they want to be or not.
Yeah.
And so it's just such a helpful resource. Even just the information they provide is hugely helpful.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Fitzgerald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of great questions from my colleagues already, and thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. As it relates to docket 1545, 1680, and 81, I think this would be great, as I think this would help. Would a lot of this be focused on the Massancas area, or the things of that nature? It looks like by the description, right, that's where a lot of these services would be coordinated.
For sure. I mean, they are citywide. I mean, I think any officer in any district is going to benefit from the skills they learned during that training.
Sure.
And could possibly get some benefit from the help of the recovery coach, but for sure, a lot of it is focused in a lot of those skills end up getting used in Massancas.
Yeah, which is great, and I think it should be citywide, as we're seeing. Massancas sits in District 3 that I represent, and so I'd love to see some efforts go there. But as we've noticed, as that's sort of been broken up on Atkinson, with the creep has gone into other neighborhoods. So I think it's great that all officers should have that training, because it's really starting to spread into other districts and precincts for you guys as well. So that's great. I just want to be sure I'm correcting this. The CIT, it is not I think there's the same acronym for somebody else, right? You have the crisis intervention team, and then the community interaction team.
Interaction teams, yes. So CIT, I think they've actually, yes, CIT has been around forever. This CIT, the crisis intervention team training,
Right.
the Memphis model has been around for a very long time. The community integration teams, and now what I see in Britain, they've kind of dropped the CIT. Maybe they still use it internally, but I think they realized there was some confusion there. But yes, very different. Not very different, in fact. I'm sure that people on the CITs would benefit from CIT training, but not the same.
We are looking at changing the name because of the confusion.
It would help.
Yes.
But it was good. As for that, and Superintendent, as for docket 1622, I'm actually disappointed that it's only 56 or, roughly $57,000, because I think all of us in our day-to-day travels throughout the city, and of course as councilors, we hear all the time from our constituents about the dangers on the road, people driving reckless, speeding, et cetera. We want speed bumps. Hey, John, we need speed bumps on this street, and every family you go to asks for it. And I know $56,000, $57,000 can go a long way on getting some of the signage and things like that. But is there a way that we can, are there other grants out there to try and get that, to go for more that are focused on traffic enforcement? Because I know, aside from the mass and cast issues in my district, which was probably the #1 issue, #2 or 1A or 1B is traffic enforcement. So I'd love to try and support that more.
Okay, I think we can look at what other grants are out there that could support this, but even though this is a grant-funded initiative, traffic enforcement is something that we do on a regular basis, and so this doesn't take any focus away from us putting efforts into areas where we're seeing issues around traffic. This just enhances it. So we are, looking strategically at areas that are experiencing, issues around traffic that's reported to us through the community. Some of the things that may not necessarily result in crash data, but issues that we still need to be addressing relative to traffic enforcement.
What would you see, and forgive my lack of knowledge on this, but I believe there used to be a traffic enforcement department within Strictly, or was that ever in the history of BPD? I actually don't know. That was strictly around traffic enforcement?
We have auto and we have what we call Tango 55 cars within the district stations. So that's cars that are specifically focused on traffic enforcement. We also have our mobile operations division, which we often use for traffic enforcement as well. Doesn't mean that other officers aren't also focused on traffic enforcement, but those two specific groups do specifically focus on that area.
If we had more officers, do you think there would be a huge hurdle to clear to make a traffic enforcement specific, or to beef up what is the Tango now and things like that? Is that the issue? Is that where you would look to try and put, if we were able to recruit and retain better, is that where you would look to put some of them?
I mean, I really think that traffic enforcement is something that all officers should be doing throughout their tour of duty. So it's something that we should be looking at departmentally as a part of what our duties and responsibilities are. Would a unit that specifically focused on that help? Yes, in any unit that specifically focuses on an area that we've identified could help, but we as a department should be focusing on that on a daily basis.
No, appreciate it. Thank you, Chair. I think that's my time. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Fitzgerald. Councilor Weber, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll start with Lieutenant Messina and Jenna. This summer, I represent Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury. My office got calls about drug use around the Forest Hills T station. And so we ended up working with BPD and E13 and the Transit Police and the Coordinated Response Team. So what is BPD's interaction with the Coordinated Response Team? Can you just describe that?
We are a member of the Coordinated Response Team. So when, let's say, 311 calls come in for unhoused individuals or for encampments, we are involved in that response.
Okay. But then there's also people outside of BPD. I found that people were more, in the community were more willing to call a non-police number. They were sort of like, I don't want to call 911. I don't want to send a police officer where somebody might be having like a mental health issue. So just having that non-police response, but and they're bringing you along, or how does
So
that...
when a non-police response comes in through 311, I'm sorry, I'm choking.
Okay.
We triage those, CRT triage those calls. So if police is not part of that triage, then the CRT will send their own outreach workers out. If we are, then they will send us out as well.
I guess I'll also add that haven't done a lot of work myself with the coordinated response team, but my understanding is that it's not intended as an alternative response, that it's literally just supposed to be coordinated across the different city agencies, and so there's no reason for the BPD not to be involved. But the city, as far as I know, the Boston Mental Health Commission is, I believe, working on a community-led emergency response that is specifically non-police involved, like, as an alternative response. So I think the city is working on addressing that need, but I don't think the coordinated response team was intended to be that response.
No, yeah, okay, and then, so I guess, in terms of responding to mental health calls, what's BPD stance on using, non-uniformed officers? I mean, obviously, there's safety issues, just, what do you tell folks who, are looking for social workers, or, how we should be thinking about that issue?
So luckily now, I mean, we have Squad 90, which is through Boston EMS. And a lot of these calls, when they come in through 911, the triage, so some of them are EDP 3s and some of them are EDP 2s. EDP 3s are normally the non-police response. They are just primarily EMS, sometimes Squad 90. Squad 90 consists of an EMT, specially trained EMT, along with a social worker. And EMS can definitely explain more on that. So when those calls are coded like that, that unit goes out, EMS goes out. EDP 2 is more for the higher level calls that come in where there's a potential for violence. If there's a potential for violence, Boston Police is dispatched to that call along with the best clinician. We are fortunate right now to have best clinicians at our disposal, and if one's not assigned to that area or working in that particular shift, we go all out, we call it. That's citywide. So a best clinician from East Boston could respond to something in Jamaica Plain. That's triage as an EDP 2.
We also did a social media campaign this past March, I believe, was Mental Health Awareness Month, where we kind of encouraged, we're trying to get the word out through social media that you can request a best clinician. So if you call 911, you can request a co-responder. So that's just something to kind of let your constituents know that is definitely something that if that person's available, they'll try to be there.
Okay, yeah, I think we ended up circulating numbers for people, and I just thought we, I think people wanted a non-911 type, number to call, or even 311.
There's also always, BEST has its own 1-800 number that you can call 24/7. It won't be as fast as a response, but that's what they've been doing forever as well. So I could get back to this body with that number, but there is a 1-800 number that is 24/7
Okay.
for just mobile clinicians as well.
That'd be great, yeah. Sorry,
And that is mobile clinicians, so they triage those calls at the 800 number, and they will send a mobile clinician, which is a non-police response to that particular residence.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just quickly for Superintendent, on traffic, I guess, my office gets a lot of calls from folks who are like, there's people speeding everywhere, and the BPD just, kind of watches, and I guess, what can I tell people in the community about traffic enforcement as in terms of BPD's priorities?
Well, I think it is a priority, and I think it's important for us to hear that, and it's important for me to hear that, so that I can reach out to the district captains, have conversations with them, and we can strategize and figure out the best way to address that, so people aren't seeing individuals speeding and it's not being addressed.
Yeah, I guess as a comment, among other issues, something I've seen, and people have complained to me about with new bike lanes. Cars are often, if they make a right turn, they see a bike lane there, they'll go in, even though there are bollards or something, they'll think, oh, that's the right turn lane. And I think, I know I've spoken to the chief of streets about that, and I think there might be something to do there where cars aren't squeezing through a 3-foot, bike lane.
There's a spot in West Roxbury where I did that myself, right getting into Roche Brothers.
At Roche Brothers, exactly.
It's really
I see
a
it
tough spot.
50% of the time that I go to Roche Brothers is somebody, I'm coming from the other direction, somebody is making a right, and they think, oh, great, it's my own turn lane, even though it was painted green and there's a bike and bollards and everything. So anyway, just throwing that out there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Council President Nugent, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Boston Police Department for being here. I just had a question that was piggybacking off of the one that Councilor Weber just asked. And I believe Jenna and Lieutenant Messina, you were both responding. If someone calls 911 for a best, could they request just a best clinician? But if they, they can. If they call 911.
No, not just a best clinician.
Okay.
Sorry. They can,
Yeah.
If you
It
go
would be a
through-
it would be
It would
a
be a
co-response.
co-response. And but there's co-responders now with BPD. It's just, as Lieutenant Messina mentioned, is more like EDP 2s when there's kind of more of a threat of violence or weapon on scene.
Right.
And also just keep in mind that obviously there's 1,000 other calls that are mental health related that are coded as something completely different.
Right.
That co-responders also go to. Then there's also now EMS can take calls that are kind of those lower level, no threat of violence, no weapon, and they also can have a co-responder with them. They have their own best clinicians. And so I think anytime you call 911, you're probably going to get some sort of uniformed response, either EMS, BPD, or both, depending.
Right.
But either way, you can certainly request a corresponding clinician to come with either/both of those. But again, and I wrote down, I'm going to get back to you with the 1-800-BEST number. That is a mobile clinician's
That is,
only.
so just to be
So
clear,
that's kind of how we.
that's not the number?
1-800, it's. Yeah,
I'll get it.
Okay. It's like, is the number 1-800 best
It's
clinician?
no, so no. But the idea being that BEST as a mobile clinician unit has existed for a long time
Yeah.
for the wider Boston area. The problem is that they can take up to an hour to get wherever they need to go. So co-response was a way of kind of taking a few specialized positions that are now embedded with the police so they can get there faster.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage. The disadvantage is that you're coming with the police. For a lot of people, that's a disadvantage,
Right.
which I understand. So yes, you can always still call BEST directly. Lieutenant Messina is working on getting the 1-800 number.
Okay.
And I think also, I could be wrong, but I think when you call 1-800 number directly, there might be more insurance complications. Whereas I think they have an understanding that if it comes through the BPD,
Right.
they'll take anything.
Interesting.
But I don't want to discourage anyone from ever calling.
Right.
I do think it's just kind of more guaranteed services, I think, through the BPD. I hope I'm not misspeaking. Did you
No,
get
it's
it?
1-800-981-4357.
4357. Okay, thank you very much. Just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues in support of the BEST team and the work that they do. I'd be curious to like, is there a review of the data to inform practices based on like the best, like the calls that the BEST team is responding to, and that how that informs future responses or what's needed? I'm curious to see what the data looks like for the co-response, and like how does that inform the work going forward?
It's a great question. We're actually working, we have a grant currently through the BJA that is allowing us to actively coordinate and link BEST co-response data with BPD data.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, names can get shared on an emergency basis, but there are these two separate databases. And that is, we want to focus mostly on high utilizers. We want to understand who are the folks who are kind of the highest users of services on both ends and what we can be doing differently to kind of better coordinate and prevent future calls. So the first thing is always the data is challenging, so but we're actively working on it as we speak. We have done some evaluations of co-response, but it hasn't been really utilizing the co-response data because we haven't been able to get at it yet. But we've got MOUs in place and data sharing, and we're trying to kind of work on getting that information.
And when do you think that report would be
Hopefully
available?
within a year.
Okay, I'm very curious because it also leads to more efficiency, to better use of
1,000%.
everyone's resources. So very, very much looking forward to seeing that report, and I want to thank you again. My last questions are about, for Superintendent Cullinane, the grant. So it's $56,000, and you said about 3 are for the speed monitors?
Yes.
What's the remainder of the 56 for?
So for the overtime, for the traffic safety mobilizations, it's $26,095.62. For the pedestrian bicycle enforcement mobilization, $16,287.04. And then within that equipment, there is also the cloud service as well as the mounting brackets for the actual radar.
Are any of those personnel, like you said, activation or mobilization, are any of those of personnel, or are we just talking about equipment?
No, the overtime is for personnel.
Okay, it's for personnel.
Yes. That's correct.
Another question related to sort of like efficacy. So I don't know what you call the speed monitors.
Yes.
Has there been data to show, do they have a deterrent effect on driver behavior? I mean, I'm assuming the answer is yes, because hopefully that's why we're buying them. But what have you seen? Like, what is a deterrent effect of having those, your speed is and having the blinking lights? Or are we going off of like, we're assuming and we think that this is a good practice?
Yeah, I think, I'm sure we can get you data and research around it, but I do know that the intent is once people see that information flashing before them, they slow down, and it will allow us to kind of look at that data in that area just to see, and then work with other city agencies if there are other types of things that we need to put in place to slow down traffic in that area. So I think it's kind of twofold. It's going to, serve a purpose of having people look at their own behaviors, and then as a city, we can look at what we can do and put into place to address some of those issues.
Because those numbers, are they fed, even though I know there's not enforcement on them, but are those numbers fed back to
Yes.
you to determine like
So-
what the average speed is going down the street to like help it with like placement of speed bumps, further traffic enforcement issues?
That's my understanding, so that's what
Okay.
the purpose of that cloud service is
Perfect.
to have that information.
Perfect, thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Council President. I would also like to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilor Gabriela Coletta Zapata. You have the floor right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all so much for being here. I apologize that I was late, but I was listening in. I have no questions, just want to echo support for these grants and just thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you to the best team, Matthew, in East Boston. We're very, very lucky in East Boston and in the North End. I went on a walkthrough with folks to check out some spots where they've provided services. So I feel like, we're well serviced in my district, especially with Neighbor Health. We have emergency care for behavioral health. We also have North Suffolk Mental Health. So just a wonderful team, and it's been great to see the progress in this space, even in the last 5 years, to really service our folks going through mental health crises or substance use disorder. So no questions or further comments, just gratitude, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. At this time, I will go now for a second round of questions, starting with Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For Lieutenant Messina, Lieutenant, what are you seeing in the downtown area, and how are we getting recovery services to people in the Boston Common and downtown crossing as well? And what's the latest developments that your team is observing there?
So we are downtown. I have officers assigned down there each day of the week, and we are interacting with individuals on the ground there. We are also working with the CIT teams down there, the both day and evening CIT teams, and that's been very effective so far.
Thank you. Lieutenant Cullen, I was at the South Boston waterfront last night meeting with residents from the Seaport Neighborhood Association about speeding vehicles, traffic enforcement related issues in that particular neighborhood. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on what we can do specifically in the Seaport area on pedestrian safety, traffic enforcement issues?
Yes, so we have a traffic analyst that works in the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, and I actually just had them gather some data in the Seaport area, and so we're working with our mobile operations unit as well as the district to come up with some strategies in that area. I was also present at that meeting, so I heard those concerns, and we take it very seriously, and so we are working on ways to address some of those issues.
Oh, you were at the meeting today?
the meeting.
Okay,
in,
okay.
in South Boston.
No,
yeah.
thank you, Superintendent. Then my final question, Superintendent, is, I think one of my colleagues mentioned it, but how are we providing the best pedestrian safety to our residents, knowing that electric bikes, many of them don't follow the rules or regulations of the road, including just kind of going through the stop sign, going through lights, including bicycles. How are we able to enforce that and ensure pedestrian safety in almost every neighborhood?
I think you have to look at it from a very strategic standpoint. I think it's a much more difficult issue to address than motor vehicles, which you have a license plate, things of that nature. But we are looking at ways of having people, so even within this within, this funding period, we have operation, we'll be doing some Operation Crosswalk, which is something that we haven't done. So we'll actually be having people, that are out there that can address some of those issues that may be much more difficult to address if you're in a motor vehicle and the person is, in a bicycle lane, different things. So we're looking from a strategic standpoint, just in different ways to address some of those issues that we see. And a lot of that is education as well. And so we're looking at ways to educate people on safe operation of e-bikes, of, pedal bikes, of motorcycles, just all of the things that we're seeing that we're having issues with from a traffic enforcement standpoint.
Yeah, thank you. My final point, not really a question, is I would support making sure that e-bikes or bicycles, they do have some type of way where they're able to be identified so that they, it's critical that they also follow the rules of the road to ensure pedestrian safety, but it's very difficult for the police to, or anyone really, to identify them when they don't have, when they're not licensed or they don't have any type of registration, I guess. But I think that's something in the interest of pedestrian safety and public safety. I think it's important that we review that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Do any of my... Yep, Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Councilor Flynn mentioned a specific neighborhood, and you said, is it the Brick? There's somewhere where you can pull data
That's
about the traffic?
That's correct.
Yes, can you pull data for a specific street? Like how granular can you get that data?
I would have to speak with the analyst about that. If there is information where we've, citation information, we're looking at that as well,
Okay.
how to best collect citation information. So if there is a street associated with whatever enforcement has taken place, yes, we would be able to
You
pull
could
that
help with that.
information.
Okay, I can
Correct.
follow up with you after,
Okay.
because there's definitely certain streets citywide where people might, call and concerns, so it would be great to know if there's already data, just to kind of match that with the support that we're trying to get, other departments to step up and support with. But thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. At this time, that wraps it up for council questions for the second round. I do want to thank our panelists. I don't know if you have any final remarks you may want to say, but if not, we can dismiss you.
Just want to thank you for taking the opportunity to hear, our comments on the grants that we're looking to have funded. I think that, overall, when we think about community and public safety and our mission of community policing, these grants will help us further our mission.
Great.
And if you ever want to learn more about anything mental health related that BPD is doing, it's my favorite topic of conversation, so always happy to meet with anybody, anytime, anywhere.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to provide an overview of the second set of 4 dockets that we will be reviewing, along with the panelists the committee invited to testify on behalf of the administration on these dockets. And again, for members of the Boston Police Department and administration who are here to testify today, I kindly ask that you only be seated at the panelist table right now if you are testifying on one of these specific 4 dockets. Our second panel will be on dockets number 1546, FY24 DNA Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Program, 1548, FY24 Port Security, 1770, Federal Burn Justice Assistance, and docket number 1676, Securing the City's Continuation. For dockets number 1546, the committee invited Maria Cheevers, Director of Research and Development with the Boston Police Department. For dockets number 1548 and 1770, the committee invited Sergeant Christopher Bailey, Harbor Patrol Unit with the Boston Police Department. And for dockets 1676, the committee invited Anthony Rizzo, Metro Boston Securing the Cities with the Boston Police Department. For the panelists who are here today, I'd like to ask each of you just to state your name and title for the record. And once everyone has to introduce themselves, we'll move forward with opening remarks.
I think that you listed me for Kevin's grant.
Oh,
I'm doing the SORB grant, which is the Sexual
Is that the last, is that the last one?
1770 docket.
Sorry. Okay, no. So 1770?
So I stay here?
Yep, you can stay
Okay.
here.
Thank
I just misread, I think that's a mistake on my end. So if you, for the panelists who we have today, if you can just introduce yourself and your title, and then we can proceed with opening remarks.
Hi, my name is Kevin Larad. I'm the Director of Quality Assurance for the Forensic Division of Boston Police Department.
Sergeant Chris Bailey, Boston Police Harbor Patrol Unit and Harbor Master for the city.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Anthony Rizzo, Program Manager for the Securing the Cities program.
Good afternoon. I'm Maria Cheevers, Director of Research and Development for the Boston Police.
Great, thank you all. At this time, I'd like to invite our panelists to please proceed with opening remarks. I kindly just ask that in order to allow time for councilor questions and discussion, that you please limit your opening remarks to 5 minutes per grant. With that, please proceed with opening remarks in whatever order you prefer, covering these 4 grants.
Who's going to go first?
I can start quick. So the grant I'm here for is the FY24 CBER application, and it's to fund, it's a grant we've had for 20-plus years. It funds capacity enhancement backlog reduction for our crime lab to do DNA work. With it, we typically, and we have for quite some time, funded 2 full-time criminalists to do screening in our evidence section of the crime lab and DNA testing. We use it to support overtime hours to do work on untested DNA cases. We use it to buy DNA testing supplies for the people that we hire as well as the people that are working on overtime. And we use it to support our continuing education needs. It's mandated through accreditation to have certain degree of continuing education with our DNA analysts, and we use it to support that as well for both travel and registration costs.
Awesome.
Afternoon. I stand today, or I speak today on behalf of the Harbor Patrol Unit for Boston Police Department in reference to Docket 1548. This particular grant is basically a maintenance upkeep to maintain the efficacy and the operational readiness of the Harbor Patrol Unit. We utilize these grants annually to augment our maintenance budget, and so that's why I'm here today to give witness to Docket 1548.
Thank you. In regards to docket 1676, the Securing the Cities grant, the Securing the Cities Boston program is a federally funded grant program from the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office. Its mission is to prevent the successful possession, movement, deployment of a nuclear or radiological weapon and component materials by an adversary within the United States. The goal of the program is to develop and enhance sustainable radiological and nuclear detection capabilities among all participating partners in the region. Those partners include the Boston Police Department, the Boston Fire Department, Boston Emergency Medical Services, the Office of Emergency Management, Massachusetts State Police, Massachusetts Environmental Police, Massachusetts Port Authority, the Massachusetts Department of Fire Services, Quincy Police Department, Hingham Police Department, and over 20 other local police, fire departments, and several bomb squads throughout the New England region. The program is entering its 5th year. This will be the 5th award granted to the program. The continuation funding will be allotted to the purchase of detection equipment and backfill and overtime for all personnel who receive training on that equipment. The equipment will be worn by first responders, outfitted in marine vessels and aircraft to be used to passively detect radiation during daily operations. Thank you.
I'm here to discuss today an annual grant that we received from the Massachusetts Sex Offender Registry Board. This program allows us $80,700 this year to have police officers visit the addresses that sex offenders note as their place of residence within the city to check that they, in fact, are in those residents. There's also indirect cost involved, so that's 10%. So $73,360 of the dollars go to the overtime cost for the Sexual Offender Registry Board police officers to do the visits, and $7,340 are used for the City of Boston's admin expenses. The grant will go from November 5th, which is when the contract was signed, through June 30th, 2025. The Boston Police Department will identify, investigate, and locate offenders known to be in violation of their registration obligations, and those whom law enforcement has reason to believe may be in violation by virtue of providing inaccurate addresses and inaccurate information. The Sex Offender Registry Board will reimburse the Boston Police Department for the overtime hours worked to perform these functions. And I could go on if you'd like, or, yeah,
However much information you want to provide, and then we'll go into clausura questions.
okay. I thought, is this just a summary, or is this the whole thing?
This is a summary for
Okay.
that.
Okay. So the AV intends to focus on communities with the largest populations of offenders in violation of their registration duties. The City of Boston has the largest number of offenders in violation of the Sex Offender Registry law, and Boston currently has more than double the number of offenders in violation of their registration duties than the next highest city in the Commonwealth. The Boston Police Department has the capacity and the infrastructure to carry out investigations within the scope of the program. It has extensive access to private criminal history information necessary for locating sex offenders. In addition, fulfillment of the purpose and the mission of the AVB in Boston in past years, based on trends, partnered with other police jurisdictions in several investigations. For this coming year, it will likely work with other jurisdictions again. Thus, the BPD will act in the most efficient manner through the use of limited resources to verify the accuracy of addresses of the largest number of offenders as possible. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much for those opening remarks. We're now going to pass it on to my colleagues for counselor questions. We will give 5 minutes per counselor, including panelist responses, and we will start with Counselor Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the panelists for being here. Kevin, I know we've had several conversations in the past about the crime lab. It's an issue I've focused on for many years. Who is the current director of the crime lab, the permanent director?
So the permanent director position is currently open. It's been posted. We're reviewing applicants as they come in. But the acting directors, we have a panel of directors, and then we have a commander, the sworn Captain Stephen Coughlin. And then we have Nina Jefferson, who's the director of the firearms unit.
How long has the director position been open for?
How long has it been open, or how long has it been posted?
Open.
It's been open since August of 23.
Is the previous director of the crime lab back in the crime lab?
He is.
In what position?
In quality assurance.
Are we still testing sexual assault kits every 30 days?
Yes, we are.
Are we in compliance with that?
100%.
How often does the Boston Police Crime Lab receive sexual assault kits?
We get them, we typically have a delivery once a week, but we get on average 13 kits a month.
So the deliveries are once a week?
Yep.
What day of the week is that on?
I believe it's on Monday.
And when do they get tested?
We start testing them on Monday.
All of them get tested that same day?
We'll start the processing of the kits, yes. So we do serological testing first, and then if they test positive, they get put forward through to DNA. Our average DNA turnaround time is 16 days right now.
But all of them, when you receive the sexual assault kits, they're all tested on Monday?
We begin the testing, yes.
No, I understand you're beginning, but when are they all tested on Monday? That's the question I'm asking. Like, are some of them tested on Friday or Thursday or Wednesday?
Well, the kits will be assigned and then begin testing, so we start our testing process. It might not be completed on Monday, no. I mean, I guess I'm not understanding your question.
When the sexual assault kits arrive on Monday, are they all tested on Monday, or are some of them tested later during the week?
If we get 10 kits on Monday, they might not all be necessarily be opened on Monday. They'll be assigned to the analysts, and they may open them on a Tuesday.
Okay.
I don't know what the current schedule is for
Okay.
individuals. I mean,
I just want to make sure
different
that
priorities.
I want to make sure that they're tested every 30 days.
All the kits are tested within 30 days. So the track it report has been, the annual report has been sent to the governor for review. It should be released soon, and I can provide you a copy when that's released.
Is there an outside consultant doing any work on the crime lab related issues?
With respect to,
Any type of office policy or
not
what's
that-
happening in the crime lab?
not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. How is the morale in the crime lab right now?
The same, it's fine.
Are we using the most advanced testing in the crime lab?
I mean, we just finished our accreditation assessment, and we did not have any findings or nonconformances with that, so they're the one that attests the quality of the work being done.
Are we using the most advanced testing for the sexual assault kits?
I guess I don't really know. We use testing that's appropriate for the kits, and if advanced testing, do you mean like Y screening? Is that what you're?
Exactly.
So we don't currently have Y screening in place now.
When are we going to start using Y screening?
So we did submit a grant application to seek funds for equipment to start performing that type of testing. I mean, it would obviously take a long time to implement something like that with the training, the validation, and everything like that that goes on. But to date, we have not been awarded the funding for that. So once that's been officially not funded.
We did get money in the budget for that. I specifically advocated for that so we could get Y screening in the city budget.
Right.
I want us to use the most advanced testing on sexual assault kits. That's important. I also know in my district and actually throughout the city, there's a lot of people that are reporting to hospitals and to the police that are getting stuff dropped in their drink at various bars and restaurants and being assaulted as well. That's why we need to have the best crime lab in the country. When we're not using this advanced equipment, we're not using the advanced testing equipment, and I want us to start doing that.
Okay.
I'll come back, Mr. Chair, for a second on.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you all for the panelists for being here. Is that grant that you spoke about is it just to check on addresses? Is that money supposed to cover other?
Also for investigations. There's certain compliance, so you have, for example, through September 30th of this year, there were 1,002 offenders that had registered in the city of Boston, but through the checks that have taken place, they found that 882 of those were in compliance. Again, this isn't through the end of December, this is just through September 30th.
And does in compliance mean that you're living at the address you're registered?
Exactly.
And the out of compliance just means they're not where, they haven't updated their address, or they no longer live there and you're not sure where they are?
Yeah, when they do update their address by law, they're supposed to inform law enforcement of the new address. So if they do not do that, they're in non-compliance. And then they would conduct an investigation as to where that person may be living. So some of those funds include the investigation, not just the visiting.
And are you required to tell Boston you moved, or required, like say you moved to Weymouth, are you required to tell the Weymouth police that that's your new address, and then the Weymouth police, like, is it a statewide update for the different cities and towns?
I believe when they move to the other location, they're supposed to inform.
The new place?
Yeah.
And then, so it might
Yeah.
take a little time to
Yeah.
connect, but
And it could be as well as the Boston Police. I'd have to check on that if they have to inform both.
in these police positions, so is this just to cover like overtime, or like what extra money? Because this
So they're
isn't
in
obviously to cover the salaries of the
No,
police.
no.
Right, it's just for the extra
Yep, so-
support.
So these detectives are already in the sexual assault unit conducting investigations, so this is overtime to make sure that they take the time also to go to these
Right.
addresses and double
Right, so
check.
it's not something they can't get to.
Exactly.
Right. Thank you. Kevin, is this a new grant, or is this the first time we got this grant?
No, so we've had this grant for 20-plus years.
Okay,
It's a
so-
formula grant, so we just have to provide a justification for it. The state, and it's a pass-through from the state, so the state gets like 1.3 million, and I believe we get approximately 20% of that, or around 280,000.
Okay, and is that because Boston needs it more? Like,
No, so we get less than they do. They get more money than we do.
Oh, all right, I was gonna say, yeah.
And the reason, it's just based on UCR crime, Part 1 crime, I think.
okay.
So.
And has it always been named Backlog Reduction Program? So
Yes.
is there always historically been a backlog issue?
Yep, so, and it's
Okay.
across the nation, it's not just
Right.
unique to it, like, every state gets a minimum of, I think, 600,000, and then depending on what your UCR numbers you report to the FBI, then it's all formulas, they just
Okay.
assign each state however much money the formula spits out.
Thank you. And Sergeant Bailey, I mean, yours is a small grant. Does that cover all the maintenance you need to make sure? And I know I'm glad I'm not in your position when the cold weather comes. I saw you when you were all in Charlestown, right, the other night. It's a tough job in the winter.
I agree, yes. Good afternoon.
Just 1 second.
Bailey scratches his...
Sergeant, just give me just 1 second. Oh, there you go.
Pardon me? You hear me now?
Yeah.
Excuse me. It barely scratches the surface. This particular grant through Port Security, it comes to the captain of the port. Port Security, as well as our UASI grants, our urban area security initiatives, are vital to maintaining operational readiness. Unfortunately, in what I try to tell people who want in a maritime environment, everything breaks, and it breaks often, and none of it is cheap. So we do count on these grants through the feds quite a bit, whether it's to augment existing equipment, to buy new vessels, which we are currently under the UASI program, are going to acquire a new vessel. Hopefully it'll come online by 2026 with Sail Boston. And to today's matter, this particular item is a collar, which is vital to the fendering and flotation of our primary response vessel, the 38-foot safe boat, which we acquired to my predecessor, Sergeant Joe Chivas. That is like the newest vessel right now, and it's important to maintain its flotation.
How
and
many
operational
vessels do you
effectiveness.
have right now?
At present, we operate 8 vessels, 58-foot twin diesel, and 7 outboards ranging 38-foot down to 25-foot.
And is the South Boston waterfront at the marine, is that the only place they're all docked, or are they spread out in other places?
That is our only location at 9 Terminal Street.
Okay. And one quick question. I know I was on one of the vessels in the summer, and I was speaking to EMS. Is there always EMS working alongside when you go out, or is that only staffed during summer times? I would assume
That's
it-
correct.
Just summer?
During our high season,
High season is-
come Memorial Day to Columbus Day.
If you-
They're working on that, actually. They want to propose a full-time
A full-time, I
medic
would
with
think.
our unit.
Because almost all calls that you're called out on, they're still going to need probably medical support if they're,
Most cases,
and
yes.
especially if cold water. Yeah, okay, well,
Yes.
I will advocate for that in the EMS budget. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I unfortunately had to step out for a few minutes. I missed the presentation, so I will pass my time to someone else who was here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Fitzgerald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here today. Good to see everybody. Don't have a lot of questions. Just want to say that I'm very supportive of all of these. Love to see the backlog reduction program go. Echoing Councillor Flynn and his, I'd love to hear that it's 100% being tested, and we're on the path to more efficiency there. That's great. The port security, prior to this, my job was to take care of the Marine Industrial Park, and working with Sergeant Chivas prior, and then Mr. Sergeant Bailey when you came on towards the latter end. But I understand that everything, not only do your stuff break, but also the Marine Industrial Park and everything around it breaks all the time too. So you're absolutely right about that. Nice to see updates there. Always want to see the sex offender address verification be up to date. I know many families would like to make sure that that info is correct. And then Anthony, thank you for the securing the city's continuation and all the hazardous waste and I believe it was nuclear stuff as well. So it seems like it's all good stuff. So thank you all for continuing to keep our city safe and clean. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Fitzgerald. Councilor Weber, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I guess Mr. Rizzo, the securing the cities. So do we already have the detectors, or is this, you're talking about radiation detectors, is this to, put them in?
We already have the detectors, Counselor.
Oh, okay. Yep, there you go.
Okay. We already do have the detectors, Counselor. We've had the detectors for about the past 2 years. Some of the detectors are smaller, worn on individual police, fire, EMS in the city, outside of the city with the other agencies I mentioned. There are some larger detectors that are worn inside backpacks, and then the largest devices that are installed currently in the Massachusetts State Police Air Wing and installing one in the Boston Fire Department's vessel right now. So the equipment is out there. The personnel who deploy the equipment have received training on it. This will be purchasing additional equipment, making sure that we have everything we need inside of the city, and then also pushing out our detection capabilities as far outside of the city as possible.
And I guess, so what happens if there's a trigger alarm?
So the initial tier are the individuals that are wearing devices, day-to-day operations. They receive training on not only how to use that, but how to adjudicate those alarms, or if it needs to be elevated, to whom to elevate it to. One of the things that's emphasized in the training is the fact that there are radiological materials that are being used for industrial, medical purposes. So there's plenty of innocent reasons why they may come across something like that on their shift. If it ends up being an alarm that for whatever reason they think may not be for innocent purposes, could be criminal, could be nefarious, they'll elevate that to the more specialized units. If it happens within the city, that would be the Boston Police Department Bomb Squad, Hazardous Materials Unit, and the Special Operations Unit of the Boston Fire Department. They have more advanced equipment that when they deploy, they can determine what that actual isotope is, determine if it's in regulatory compliance, and then if they need to elevate it from there, that could potentially go to the Department of Justice, Department of Energy.
Okay, and so yeah, I'm assuming any detections in the last 2 years has been medical, or industrial, not, a weapon. So but they do detect those, for medical uses also.
There have been alarms that have been adjudicated. The majority, if not all, have been for medical purposes. It's adjudicated at that level right there. Just a quick question of the individual. Sometimes hospitals provide the documentation, sometimes they don't. There have been a few instances where it's industrial, soil density gauges, and again, those are pretty quickly adjudicated because in their initial training, those officers are taught that is a possibility that they may encounter. There have not been any alarms that have ended up being for criminal nefarious purposes.
And I just last question on this. So just in terms of chemical weapons, do we have ability to detect, or are we working on that?
I do. I can't speak too much to that, Counselor, only because this is for exclusively for radiation. However, it's the same units that are out there for biochemical threats as well. This grant doesn't provide it, but I do know from working with them that those units do have chemical detection capabilities. They are receiving training on it. I don't know the extent of it, but it's the same units that we're working with for this grant.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Council President Nguyen, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually don't have any questions for this panel, but want to thank you for all the work that you do for our city. So just want to thank you, and I will ask questions to the next panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. We're going to go to a second round of questions for only the councilors who want to ask second rounds. I know Councilor Flynn does, so we're going to go over to Councilor Flynn. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to the panel. Chris, thank you for the work you're doing in the Port of Boston. Let me ask you a question, Chris. How important is it for the Boston Police, the Maritime Unit, the Harbor Patrol, to work closely with cities and towns in and around Boston and provide assistance to them in need? Is that part of your job as well?
It is. We act as a force multiplier due to the vast majority of Marine units across the Commonwealth are very sparsely manned, for lack of a better word. I presently have 11 officers, nine men and 1 female, to man the city for 24/7 coverage. We are the only maritime law enforcement agency in Boston Harbor at present. So it's crucial that we all work together, be it a group from Quincy over to Cambridge on the Charles, up to Chelsea and Winthrop. We all act together, and we all try to work uniformly in our approach to maritime safety and law enforcement.
Thank you, and I just want to say thank you to the men and women of the unit for their professional work, critical work that they provide, not just here in Boston, but it's also about supporting our partners throughout Greater Boston as well, so thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Maria, I just want to say thank you. You've been an outstanding, dedicated police employee for so many years. And anytime we've had questions and issues relating to any type of issue at Boston Police, especially on grants, you've always been there providing excellent communication, feedback, professionalism. So I just want to acknowledge the work you do every day on behalf of the police, but on behalf of the residents of the city as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kevin, I'm going to go back to the crime lab. It's just an issue I feel very strongly about. I've been involved in this issue for a long period of time. I'm also trying to advocate for a standalone domestic violence committee as well. I think it's all related. What else can we do to ensure we have the best crime lab in the country, like New York City does, like New York City Police Department does, or I know Massachusetts State Police also have the Y screening program, but we don't necessarily have it. But what else can we do to ensure that we have the best crime lab in the country?
I mean, that's an excellent question. One, I'm not sure if I'm prepared to answer that today, but we can definitely put together a list of things. I think we're pretty good as it is. I don't think there's ever been a question of the quality of the work coming out of the lab, and I think we can all stand behind that. We're very proud of the work that we do. I do think that the volume has increased over time, the red tape has increased over time, and not in a bad way, just like there are more checks and balances in place that I think that we've struggled with maintaining the same size workforce with more responsibility. It's some stuff kind of gets pushed and it takes a little bit longer. So unfortunately, I know you'd mentioned before that we were in the news for the Track It thing, but then once we had been able to rearrange our workflow and adjust our process, then all of a sudden we were able to meet that. I mean, I think it would have been nice had we been invited to be involved in reviewing or at least being aware of the fact that this statute was going to come into place before it was implemented. I mean, the 30-day turnaround time is pretty tricky. It is the most aggressive, one of the most aggressive in the nation. Typically, labs have a 180-day turnaround time, so 30 is pretty tough. But as we said before when we had talked, I think we're all proud to say that we don't have any backlogged rape kits. I mean, it's a badge of honor we have, where at least we don't have anything that hasn't been tested. It might not necessarily, and it's not to say we're proud of the fact that it's not being tested in a timely manner. It was being tested in a timely manner anywhere else in the country. I think the problem was it wasn't meeting the standard here, which was 30 days. Now we're meeting that standard for 30 days since we had that last issue mid-January, and
Yeah.
since then, everything has been done on an average of 16 days. So I think
But
that's,
the standard is actually law. We're required to meet that.
Oh, no, I understand.
Meet that law. We don't have a choice of whether or not we respect the 30 days or not. We have to meet that 30-day time period. I would like to ask the chair if we could hold a follow-up hearing specifically on the crime lab, maybe in February, if that works with scheduling. I think it's important that we do get back to hearing from the crime lab professionals on exactly how we can help them and what challenges they're currently facing. So I do want to respectfully ask the chair, maybe in February, if we have another city council hearing on the crime lab.
Yep, no, happy to work with you and your office, Councilor, to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Councilor Flynn. With that, unless any of my other colleagues have any follow-up questions, I'm just gonna, no. Councilor Fitzgerald, you have the floor.
I just want to correct something on my last statement. One of my colleagues, I won't say who, reminded me that it is the Flynn Marine Industrial Park, as I should have referred to it. But that colleague will remain anonymous, but rightfully so, I should say it is the Flynn Marine Industrial Park.
Thank you, Councilor Fitzgerald, for the correction. With that, I think if this panel, I really want to thank you for coming and testifying with us and answering our questions. Do you have any final remarks?
No, sir.
no.
All good.
Thank you.
All right.
Can
well,
I just say one thing? I do appreciate the support you guys have given us, for sure. You did mention that you had earmarked money for us. We didn't get any money for wide-type screening.
Councilor Flynn, you have the floor.
I know during the budget process, we were able to get, I advocated for $1 million, and we were able to get $1 million into the budget specifically for the crime lab. And our goal was for wide screening technology. So the money is in there. At some point, it's probably important to have a conversation of how it can be implemented. But I do know we advocated for it on the city council, and my colleagues advocated for it as well.
Okay.
I can follow up with you as well.
Yeah, that'd be great, because if we have $1 million sitting somewhere, we'd like it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't we all? No, thank you very much. Really appreciate this panel. I'll dismiss you all, and I'll call now the third panel. At this time, I'd like to provide an overview of the last set of 3 dockets that we will be reviewing, along with the panelists the committee invited to testify on behalf of the administration on these dockets. And for the members of the Boston Police Department and administration who are here to testify today, I again kindly ask that you are only be seated at the panelist table right now if you are testifying on these specific 4 dockets. Our final panel will be on dockets number 1673, FY 2024 Urban Area Security Initiative, docket number 1675, FY 24 Regional Preparedness Grant. I can't pronounce that word. And then dockets number 1772, Federal FY 2024 Emergency and Management Performance Agency. For these 3 dockets administered by the Office of Emergency Management, the committee invited Matthew Kearney, Deputy Chief of the Office of Emergency Management, Andrew Bonais, Assistant Deputy Chief of the Administration with the Office of Emergency Management, and Timothy Conley, Captain of the Boston Police Department. For the panelists who are here today, I'd like to ask each of you to just state your name and title for the record, and once everyone has introduced themselves, we'll move to opening remarks.
Sure. Good morning, or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Bloniers. I'm the Assistant Deputy Chief of Administration with the Office of Emergency Management.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Matt Carney, Deputy Chief, Office of Emergency Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tim Connolly, Boston Police Department. I'm a captain.
Great, thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite our panelists to please proceed with opening remarks. I just kindly ask that in order to allow time for councilor questions and discussion, that you please limit your opening statements to 5 minutes per grant. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll begin with docket 1673, the Urban Area Security Initiative Grant for FY24. This is an annual grant that is passed from FEMA and DHS to the State Executive Office of Public Safety and Security as the state administrative agency down to the City of Boston, managed by the Office of Emergency Management. This grant provides around $12 million, it's a little under that, for regional preparedness and enhancing capabilities in high-threat, high-density urban areas. Priority areas include safety and security, critical infrastructure protection, intelligence and info sharing, interoperable communications, SBIRNI response, which is chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosion, medical surge, planning and community preparedness, recovery, and cybersecurity. Boston is the fiduciary for this grant, so OEM receives the money from the state, or spends the money and then is reimbursed by the state for spending, but we manage it on behalf of an entity called the Metro Boston Homeland Security Region. That is Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, Chelsea, Everett, Quincy, Revere, Somerville, and Winthrop. I have to say them in alphabetical order, otherwise I forget one. In terms of what Boston receives specifically from this, we get about $1.4 million to staff the Office of Emergency Management. That's a mix of management administration funds for the grant and then a cadre of emergency management planners that support the region. They do major event planning, citywide coordination during extreme weather events, and communicate to the public during emergencies. We also are able to fund our mass notification system for the City Alert Boston, as well as the community emergency response teams, which is community members being empowered to help out in times of crisis. And then additionally, we support a number of public safety initiatives, equipment and training for first responder specialized teams, including hazmat, EOD, which is bomb squad, SWAT, K-9 team, structural collapse, swift water rescue, and the like. Now I'm going to pass it over to Deputy Chief Carney, who will talk about the Regional Catastrophic Grant Preparedness Program.
Thank you. So docket 1675 is the FY24 Regional Catastrophic Preparedness Grant Program. So the Regional Catastrophic Program provides funding to eligible state and local governments to close known preparedness capability gaps, encourage innovative regional solutions to ensure related to catastrophic incidents, and build on existing regional preparedness efforts. So most recently, we have been awarded this funding from the FY19 and FY22 grants with a focus on disaster housing, and in the 22 grant on community resilience. The FY24 grant is building off of the work done in FY22 to continue that work. So some of the main areas in which we're focusing that grant is on extreme weather operations planning, continuing to build out our public education materials to include climate adaptation and mitigation programs for residents, business owners, homeowners, as well as partnering with both private and nonprofits to help build out a robust resource network to help aid at the neighborhood level during emergencies. Oftentimes, entities will step up and want to support in different ways, and we hear about it. So through this grant, we're hoping to more formalize that partnership with the city to allow for more resources to be made available during extreme weather events. I can take it. And then docket 1772 is a FY24 Emergency Management Performance Grant. This is a non-competitive annual grant that we get awarded by MEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, and it's awarded to all municipalities in the Commonwealth. So the award amounts are based on population and intended to provide support for emergency management activities in the municipality. We typically use this funding to help support the technology within our Emergency Operations Center, professional development for our staff to grow both within the field as well as professionally, and then extreme weather preparedness items such as cooling towels, hand warmers, and the misting tents and towers that we were able to deploy throughout last summer.
Thank you. Do you have any?
I do not, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Now we're going to turn it over to my council colleagues in order of arrival for questions, starting with Councilor Flynn. Again, we're going to do 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel for being here, for the important work that you are doing in the city. Also want to recognize Captain Connolly for your outstanding work as a police officer for so many years. My question relates to the $12 million grant, and I asked Chris from the Harbor Patrol earlier, but basically my question is, how important is it for Boston to work with surrounding cities and towns throughout Greater Boston, neighboring towns as well, on public safety, security-related issues? And is that a major focus of this grant as well? And how is that communication and interagency collaboration going?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start that, and then I'll throw it to Captain Connolly.
Absolutely.
To begin, I mean, that is the whole basis of the grant is regional collaboration. So those 9 municipalities that receive funding have to work in concert and in order to spend that money effectively and to respond to emergencies in a coordinated manner. We're all so close together, these small municipalities, such that if something happens in Everett, there's no way that Chelsea, Revere, and Boston are not going to be there in a heartbeat to help out, whether it's on land or something in the harbor, as Sergeant Bailey had mentioned before. Captain Connolly represents the city of Boston in that, so there's 8 other jurisdictional points of contact, one each for each municipality in the region, and I'll let Captain Connolly speak to a little bit more of that regional collaboration.
Well, I appreciate that. As you know, we've accepted this grant for over 2 decades, and one of the things I'd like to highlight, speaking to the maritime component, is that there's a Boston Maritime radio frequency that was developed as a result of this grant, and prior to this grant, we were not able to talk amongst each other, let's say, for the arrival of the LNG when it comes in into the city. And as this, I'll call it a robust maritime communication system that was developed by the Boston Police Department through this grant, now allows all of our partners with the grant to speak to one another among these transits that come in, as well as other things. And they're looking to have that be a best practice throughout the country, and other areas and ports are starting to look to Boston specifically as the result of this grant. That was an opportunity to flourish.
Yeah, thank you. I think you mentioned what happens in Chelsea has an impact in East Boston, has an impact in South Boston and Winthrop and other neighborhoods. And this is an issue I've worked on the city council, but also serving in the Navy for 20-something years. I know this issue very well. What is the biggest challenge we have as a city or as a region as it relates to security and safety issue? And how are we dealing with that, with the focus on this money? Is it about communication? Is it about training? Is it about understanding the working relationship we have with people, knowing that Boston's a large city and an important city across the world?
I'll jump in with the beginning here before I defer to Captain Connolly. I think that's one of the most beautiful and complicated parts of this grant is that the representatives represent all different fields of public safety. So depending on who you ask, you get lots of different answers about what the most important thing is. So we have Captain Connolly from the police. Our alternate is Chief Hooley of EMS. And then other communities have fire and police representatives as well. So I'll let Captain Connolly speak to kind of his take on that from the JPOC perspective. But that's why this funding is so critical, because there are so many high priority needs in the region, and everything is getting more expensive, and the funding amount has gone down a little bit in recent years as well.
That's a good point. The funding has gone down. I'm going to answer with all of the above, Counselor, and that's an easy way to say it, because when you take a look at what matters, and you want to build and sustain capabilities, right? And we also want to address those capability gaps. So that's done through training. We just did a training in Boston over at the South Bay, and it was a great exercise. It was something called ASHER, and ASHER stands for Active Shooter Hostile Environment Response, and it's one of the mandates by this grant to be functional and have an interoperability. So we brought into this exercise, one of the key components was the 911 response. We intentionally overloaded 911 to see what would happen. We also intentionally made the interoperability, so we have these communications that we've spent millions of dollars on. We actually tested it to see if it works and how robust it actually is, and we found that through this testing that it actually worked as it was intended to work. And the command and control of the exercise was exactly as we intended it. And we brought in some equipment that was funded through UASI, more specifically a drone that flies indoors. And one of the commanders there mentioned that this is incredible to be able to send a drone in and not police officers. And he actually said, I was able to get the number of count that was on the floor without sending officers in. So that's why I'd like to say all of the above, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you for the information on these grants. I saw you out there during the summer at many events, and definitely the, the heat and that side of it, not, the weather and the changes in climate are also part of this. But also, the catastrophic preparedness, like how much is it? You just kind of touched on it, Captain, about the training that was happening over at South Bay, but how much is needed as things change so quickly? And we just want to make sure, because we'll be putting, our offices or whoever else needs to get out there, our first responders, in such harm's way. So how much is needed for the training part of it? And do we support the training part enough?
I believe this grant definitely supports the training part enough. They focus on full-scale exercises, which is kind of putting real-life situations to play and have a playbook. And I can say that being part of something called Urban Shield, which was through this grant years ago, we sort of gotten away from it, but it was definitely something where we were able to get every single person who was injured in the Boston Marathon to a major trauma center within, and I know it's under a half hour, I don't know the exact time, I want to say between 23 and 26 minutes, and that was a direct result of our planning and our training and our full-scale exercises.
Right. And are all offices trained in that? Is that like something too? And is there any training maybe at a less of a scale, though, but in the academy for our new offices coming in? For all of the academies, even EMS and like fire?
So yes, and I forgot to mention that EMS and fire are involved in the Urban Shield as well, the full scale. So if it's a full scale, all first responders will have a piece of it. A different training component, incident command system known as ICS, that's done at the academy, so they know how all this works and how it unfolds. But once they graduate, they would get, to participate in a full-scale exercise.
That's good. That's helpful. Thank you. I have no other questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Burden, you have the floor.
Good, thank you. Good afternoon, thanks for being here. I think in the menu of extreme events that we have to deal with has expanded quite considerably with climate change. Wildfires, we had a drought this fall and we had wildfires in like Braintree had a big wildfire, not a wildfire, they called it a brush fire. I don't know what's the difference between a wildfire and a brush fire. I'm just very cognizant of the fact that you almost have to be prepared for anything. And the coordination, like in terms of training, do all the different municipalities sort of participate in those training exercises?
They have in the past, yes.
Yeah, and the Urban Shield, is that an ongoing? Is that still in place, or is that something that has sort of been integrated into the whole range of things that you prepare to respond to?
I can say we did get away from it. It was a cost factor, right? It became very expensive, but it was definitely something that we're looking at as a JPOC, a joint point of contact, and we have a meeting coming up. It's one of the issues I'm going to raise at the next issue, that we have to get back to full-scale exercises in the training among the agencies, and that's what this grant is fully funded for. So that's one of the issues I'm going to raise at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of you coordinating with the other municipalities, do you meet quarterly, or what sort of frequency do you?
Councilwoman, we meet monthly.
You meet monthly? Mm-hmm. And then in terms of emerging threats or climate, like I think climate's probably one of these ones that's going to creep up on us and hit us before we know what we're dealing with. In terms of emerging threats, like, are you able to predict, or not even, predict is not the right word because that has a level of certainty with it, but just anticipate a whole menu of things? Like, I think, when we think about terrorist attacks, we didn't ever anticipate that we'd be seeing planes flying into skyscrapers.
Right.
That was way beyond our imagination. But, do you have scenarios that you prepare for?
We try to take a look at real-world events that happen and as they're emerging. So now, currently mass shootings, they're on the rise. So we're taking a look at one of the 6 national priority areas, protecting soft targets and crowded places, right? So we want to make sure that we're in alignment with the federal grant. But I can tell you our philosophy is we have an all hazards approach, whether it's man-made or natural disaster. So we're trying to think, covering everything, from a total perspective from all aspects is pretty much the philosophy, whether it's man-made or it's a natural disaster.
Yeah. And then, this past summer, and this last few summers, we've seen extreme weather events that had a lot of flooding. I don't know, we're a coastal city. If we get 15 inches of rain land on us, we're going to be in trouble. Do you have, what sort of amphibious sort of, we've got boats on the water, but what sort of capacities do you have for amphibious vehicles going in flooded streets or whatever? What's that capacity look like?
From a Boston police perspective, I'm not qualified to say. I can turn
share
it over.
I can share. So yeah, again, I can't speak to necessarily resources in Boston, but I know that this grant in the last couple of years has funded high water rescue vehicles in Winthrop and Revere. And again, anything funded by this grant has to be part of an emergency management assistance compact, where if someone from the region calls on it and asks for it, it has to be provided if it's not currently in use. So I think Quincy has a high water rescue vehicle as well, funded by this grant in previous years. So yeah, within the region there is capability for that.
Okay. I think the whole of us will all be underwater. That's the problem. And then the technology, a part of this, the Emergency Performance Agency, that last grant for technology and professional development for, that will go for, that's not a huge amount, 71,000. What sort of technology and professional development does that pay for?
So in our operations center, making sure that the phones, laptops, devices that we use when we're activated for extreme weather events or other major planned events are functional. So typically every year there's a need for a life cycle replacement of a handful of them. So that's typically what that tech refresh funding goes towards. And then as you mentioned, the new and emerging threats, so that professional development, ensuring that we're getting our staff out to conferences or other professional development trainings to network with folks who are more familiar with dealing with wildfires or other type of threats that we might not be as acclimated to.
The other thing I just wanted to ask about, if my chair will allow us to have the grace, cybersecurity, we had that worldwide sort of, doctors were going back to the good old days when they had a good pencil and paper to take notes, and they went back to paper records and that. Like, in terms of, I ask this of Do It a lot of the times when we have budget hearings, but how are you coordinating with Do It in terms of cybersecurity threats as well?
Yeah, so I'll briefly address that. We have one of the many subcommittees under the grant is the Cybersecurity Subcommittee, which is headed by Greg McCarthy, the Chief Information Security Officer here at Do It. So he leads that effort for the region, and we were in touch with him over the CrowdStrike issue as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr.
And
Chair.
I believe we funded maybe $75,000 for 2 tabletop exercises under this grant here.
Okay.
For Do It specifically, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Fitzgerald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here today. Assistant Deputy Chief Bloniers, I believe in your opening statement, you rattled off a list of sort of what this would be used for. Could you just repeat that list again? I think you had it written down, so hopefully I'm not asking you to do this from memory, but if you could please just repeat what this is used for.
Absolutely. So we have it broken among 8 subcommittees is how we kind of define this group. So we have safety and security, which is SWAT teams, special response teams, kind of law enforcement focused. Critical infrastructure protection, that includes maritime response. 3 is intel and info sharing, that is kind of coordinating information. That was a big part of the grant post 9/11, was coordinating info among agencies. Number 4 is interoperable communications. That's making sure radios can talk to one another. That's the maritime response channel that Captain Connolly had mentioned. 5 is that CBRNE acronym, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosives. So that's bomb squads, K9, hazmat teams, and urban search and rescue squads. 6 is medical surge, so that is when we have a mass casualty incident, how do we coordinate among the local hospitals to make sure that we're getting people to care as quickly as we can. 7 is planning and community preparedness. That's a little bit of a step back to say how do we coordinate for these efforts and then get our community members involved. So that's where the community emergency response teams lie. And then our final is cybersecurity is the subcommittee.
Great. Out of those, out of this approximate 12 million, is it already predetermined in this grant of how it's broken up amongst those 8 categories that you've listed?
Yes, exactly. So I can read this off here. There's about 8% or $1 million going to enhancing cybersecurity, 3% of the grant going to community preparedness and resilience, 26% going to enhancing protection of soft targets in crowded places, 1% going to combating domestic violent extremism, 6% going to enhancing information and intelligence sharing, and 3% to enhancing election security. So those are a little different because those are the 6 national priority areas that the grant outlines. Our subcommittees overlap a little bit with them, like election security falls under intel and info sharing for us. But that is the approximate breakdown. Then I have some more detailed information as well if you'd like.
No, great. No further questions. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Fitzgerald. Councilor Weber, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, yeah, along the same lines, I guess, so we're looking at the Boston Regional Intelligence Center. You know, is it, where does that fit in the committees? Is it the intelligence sharing? Does it fit under any of these committees? If you can explain, like, so if, and I guess the question is, how much of the money is going to the Regional Intelligence Center?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying my numbers here. So yeah, the Regional Intelligence Center is under our goal area 3 of intelligence and info sharing, so you picked that out correctly. That is identified in the notice of funding opportunity that one of the investment justifications we provide has to go towards supporting a regional fusion center. So that's predetermined by the grant. And about $2 million in this FY24 grant is going towards that. So I think that's a little bit around 16% we had identified. It does change year to year as the funding amounts change and as the priorities change among these 9 members that allocate the funding. But this was voted on in the spring of this year when the notice of funding opportunity was made public. And then we are only just receiving it from federal government to state government to us now in December.
Okay, and I guess, you know, I think my concern is, and we've passed a resolution in this council reaffirming the Boston Trust Act, and that money is going into something that might go against that mission, I guess. So, you know, what kinds of commitments can the Boston Police Department make that, you know, with increased funding or receiving this grant that, you know, with an administration that I think it's, as outwardly said, they're going to try to increase enforcement and even go after cities that don't share information, you know, what we're going to do to make sure that money is not used to, you know, aid immigration actions.
Yeah, I'll begin with that, and then I'll throw it to Captain Connolly. We are, you know, as with these federal grants that are passed through the state down to the local, we are required to follow the most stringent requirements of any of those, which often ends up being the local. So for Boston, we are fully in line with the surveillance ordinance the City Council has passed, as well as any other policies about the trust, the City Council Trust Act, you said. But I will defer to Captain Connolly for more specifics.
Well, thank you. It's a really tough question, right? And I think that in addition to the Surveillance Act and the Trust Act, that we meet and have these conversations as well, right? And you put us on our toes and what we need to do and what we don't need to do as far as, you know, what's best for the community. So in the spirit of community policing, like, we work for you, right? And that's why we're here to answer these questions, you know? So I think this organization here, right, this council will enforce exactly what will be spent and what it won't be spent on.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the Boston Trust Act, you know, it says that, you know, a law enforcement official or employee, you know, will not perform, you know, quote, perform the functions of an immigration officer, will not make arrests based solely on ICE administrative warrants, and won't provide personal information. So I guess, you know, for this grant, does any of that impact your ability to satisfy those provisions?
Not currently, no.
Okay, and is there any language in the grant that, makes it difficult to follow the Boston Trust Act?
At this time, we're not aware of any, but there has been some hubbub from the state level about what new administration coming in January might do to current and future grants around cities and states that don't comply with particular federal orders. So right now, we don't know of anything, but we are certainly on the lookout for anything that might come up.
Okay, yeah, and I think, this did come up in the last Trump administration, and generally the courts said that cities can, city police departments can't be commandeered to enforce federal immigration standards. So I hope that we'll continue to, uphold that. I guess in terms of, we talk about the gang database here, and what kinds of protections are in place. I know that in prior hearings, the police department has talked about, eliminating very young kids, changing the formula. What can you tell us about efforts to make sure that part of the BRIC is sort of, is equitable, is not just used to pull people over who don't even, who may have talked to a gang member in the past or something?
Right, I know that. I believe it was in 2021, there were revisions placed in that rule. And I believe that they were satisfied by everyone. I'm not sure if the city council, but I'm pretty sure that was satisfied. And I think it's Rule 355 in the Boston Police Department emerged as a result of the conversations that happened before that. And that's a result of those conversations, those changes.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a second round. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Council President Nguyen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I see you up there, Director Walsh. Some of my questions are going to be for you, so yes. I just want to thank you all for being here. I understand the regional importance of this grant, and you also know that it draws a lot of scrutiny, as it should, because of the potential harm, especially for communities. We know that, especially with respect to BRIC, involved in the past deportation of a wrongful deportation of a member of our community. And so we just want to make sure that we're always getting it right. And Andrew, it looked like you were reading from it, but at the hearing for this last year, I asked for the version of the EOP, the 23 and 5 years prior version of the EOPS plan, the Notice of Funding, Opportunity, and the JPOC plan. We don't have that, but it also looks like you are reading from it. It's this that lays out the 9 categories. Do we have it for FY24?
We don't have I can share that with you after this meeting.
Can you please share it? And then the chair could please share it with the council, because I think for a lot of the questions that people have, like, what is this grant? What does it cover? What does it look like? Andrew, you did a great job outlining the 9 cities, but this actually also does a pretty decent job of giving the breakdown. And I'm just going to say it for the record, it should be in here, but if you could submit a written line item breakdown of how the money will be spent, including specific software, staffing, and fees, as you have in years past, that would be helpful. And then a sub-question of that, this may be directed to Director Walsh. I know that when it's just an information question. I know that I asked this when I came and visited the BRIC, but just for the record, how many positions at BRIC are funded through this UASI grant, and how many are currently filled? And how will BPD sustain personnel positions if UASI funding were to decline? Which, Captain, you stated that funding is already declining, and I know that there is an issue generally in the city when we are funding permanent personnel positions with federal grants.
That's correct, Madam President.
Certainly, sorry.
I'm just going to turn on the mic in the back.
Test. There we go.
Yep.
Sorry. Ryan Walsh, Director of the Boston Regional Intelligence Center. Thank you for your question, Counselor. So we currently fund 12 full-time positions and 2 part-time positions off of the grant. There are, I believe, 3 of those that are vacant right now, and we're sort of in the hiring process to refill those positions. Certainly, long-term sustainment is a concern. We've begun.
So, 12 full-time, 2 part-time.
Yep.
And 2 vacancies.
3 total vacancies across those.
3 total. Okay.
Yep. That's just within the BRIC, I should say.
What percentage of the BRIC is funded through UASI grants?
About 20%.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then so the sustainability if the funding were not to continue.
It's certainly a concern of ours for sure, that we've been actively talking about for a couple of years now as the funding has sort of slowly declined. We are sort of talking about it internally. We've been talking about it with federal partners as to sort of how critical the funding is for us. I think right now we would not be able to sustain all of those positions through regular budgeted funds, but we have been looking at different ways to sort of begin to move some of those things in future budget requests to bring them, more of that onto the city budget, sort of anticipating in future years. I will say we've also, because of the 3-year spending period of the grant, we've been able to sort of structure ourselves to have a little bit of a time lead. If the funding were to go away next year, we would not sort of immediately be in a problem. We'd have 2 or so years to sort of work on that sustainment challenge.
Thank you, Director Walsh. Can you just submit through the chair the complete list of the positions of BRIC that are funded through this grant? The full-time, part-time, whether they're a sworn or civilian also, that's a question that I usually ask but forgot.
All civilian.
You'll submit, okay,
Yep,
thank you. As you know, I've been pretty critical of the BRIC, again, for the harm that it causes to our communities, for problems with the gang database, which I know that you are, Director Walsh, that there's currently in the process of reform. Again, the issues of deportation and what prior courts have stated. UASI poses particular interesting questions because of the regional nature of it and because it's not just about BRIC. So whereas a few weeks ago I voted against a grant that was specifically about BRIC until I'm able to see those metrics about the reform that we've been coming to BRIC about and that we've been asking about and that community have been asking about, this one encompasses more than just the BRIC. It's about all of these components that are found in the JPOC final allocation summary that are really important to the region. And we know that when you go to those monthly JPOC meetings, it's not just about Boston. My last question for this round will be, I think there was a comment that stated that, there are some, being able to purchase equipment for SWAT teams. Like there's one police department that does that under this UASI grant. Could another police department that's also covered by UASI, could they use that equipment?
Most of the equipment is regional. It depends on the equipment. If it was something that was, say, issued to a police officer, probably not. But if it was something called a Bearcat, which is an armored vehicle, then that would definitely be shared among the different agencies.
Okay.
So currently, Boston Police Department shares their bomb squad with the region, as well as their SWAT team.
But it's only within the region. Like, how does that actually work, the sharing of this object?
It's determined usually at the JPOC meetings when it's purchased, what the requirements will be for that purchase.
Okay, thank you. I have additional questions about information sharing via federal agencies along the lines of questioning that Councilor Weber had, and I have a few more questions that I'll say for my second round. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to BPD and OEM and for everyone for all the work you do.
Thank you, Madam President.
Great. Thank you, Council President. And Councilor Coletta Zapata, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your work. My first question, well, I guess I'll start with the BRIC, and then I'll go to the emergency preparedness grant. I think I just have a comment because my colleagues' questions were very thorough, but the wrongful deportation of a student happened in East Boston in 2017, I think, 2016, and that happened by miscategorizing him as a gang member. And so that information went from a school resource officer to directly to the BRIC, right? And there's been some safeguards that have been put in place since then, and then that student was deported. And so as my colleague mentioned, I know that the gang database and and other aspects of BRIC are currently in the process of reform. I want to say thank you to the director who has entertained many conversations. I've actually spoken to the commissioner about this as well. I want to make sure that we are protecting our most vulnerable here in this city and making sure that no one is wrongfully deported, and we are upholding all aspects of the Trust Act. So I feel like that was important for me to say on record. I want to zero in on the emergency preparedness grant. I think it's, the catastrophic preparedness grant. You had mentioned that you intend to utilize this grant to work with private entities and nonprofits. to help aid during an emergency. We know that these wonderful organizations will step up. They actually already have. For example, NOAA in East Boston is actively trying to organize a climate preparedness summit. I would love for that summit to educate what we do with this money moving forward. And you also said, you want to formalize those partnerships, provide more resources during extreme weather events. My district is very vulnerable, if not the most vulnerable, to severe weather events like hurricanes. If Hurricane Milton or Helene were to ever hit to Boston, or were to ever hit Boston, and so this work is very important to me. Can you just talk through what you mean by providing more resources and how you will formalize those partnerships?
Yeah. So this actually came about, unfortunately, as a result of a fire in East Boston, where the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center opened their doors for probably 12 plus hours while we were waiting to try and secure housing for folks that were displaced. And kind of through that, we're looking to more formalize how do we partner with East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, and then expanding it to other nonprofits and entities in the city that are willing and able to step up and provide whatever resources they have. So, but we want it to be done in a way that is not, we're just not taking just from them. So, well, what are some of the barriers to entry? Is it staffing? Is it space? What are they able to provide, but they need the city to help step up and help support with? So trying to understand how we can help get some of these nonprofits that maybe want to partner but just aren't able to right now. So that's kind of what we mean by, what resources can we collaborate on to help build up that capacity, whether it be, the staffing, the space, the ability to utilize some of the other resources that they have, and what can the city do to incentivize them to make it a fair partnership.
Okay, and so in my mind, reading this was more for like weather events, right? But this was a direct allocation based on a fire in East Boston. Do you happen to know which one? Which street? Or can you get back to me with that information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then the health center had opened up their doors, and this is just to house those folks in the interim while we try to find them long-term housing?
Yep. So that was the example that happened in this instance, because it happened to be around the corner from where the fire took place. And we view this as not just extreme weather, but an all hazard. We take an all hazards approach as well. So whether it's fires, flooding, extreme heat, extreme cold, how do we augment the community centers and libraries that we utilize to make sure that there are more resources available to residents in their neighborhoods, in the places that they already tend to go to, every day? How do we make those spaces more resilient for residents?
Okay, and with the climate summit that's potentially going to happen in the community, under NOAA or whoever, could we utilize that to inform how this money is going to be spent, or is it already laid out and allocated? Yeah,
so actually through the FY22 grant, we're working on rolling out Resilience Hub. So what the BCYF centers and schools in the city that we already utilize for a lot of these emergency response functions, how do we then make a standard list, if you will, of what sites might need in order to participate, and through that we're going to be reaching out to nonprofits and getting the ball rolling on how we can partner, and so that outreach is going to begin early in 2025 and then continue through the 2024 grant.
Thank you so much, and really thank you for your work on this. We are light years ahead of many other cities, so I just want to thank you, and thank you, sir, for coming as well too.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we go over to second round of questions, because I know my colleagues do have second round, I'm just going to ask one question, Great. So, my office has been receiving a lot of emails and social media messages from members of the public asking for more opportunity to testify at a later date, specifically to docket number 1673. If the council were to provide additional opportunity for public testimony at a date earlier in January prior to voting on this docket, specifically again to docket 1673, would those few weeks of opportunity for additional public comment significantly jeopardize the programs funded by this grant?
So unfortunately, yes, we are on a tough timeline with when we get the contract from the State Executive Office of Public Safety and Security in terms of when we can get it before the council takes their break at the end of the year. We are up against the gun in terms of getting some programs funded starting in early January. We wish we got the NOFO earlier from the federal government so we could move faster on this. We're certainly open to providing more information and attending those opportunities for public testimony, but that would jeopardize the access to the funding for the city of Boston and the programs that are funded by it, and for the region. Just personally, we get a lot of flack when we end up having to delay things from the rest of the communities in the grant.
Yeah, no, just follow up on that. I mean, I understand the region part aspect of it and the pressures getting from outside cities. And I mean, you're saying, yes, this will have an impact on the, can you just talk about, I mean, if this was to be brought up tomorrow versus early January for a vote, can you talk about what's actually being jeopardized there?
Absolutely. So the number one is lead time on large vehicle procurements and just large procurements in general, is that a lot of communities have gotten quotes from vendors with estimated prices that have an end date of December 31st that they anticipate price increases going into 2025, as a lot of these vendors do. So we've been getting told that there's a lot of money that's planned to be allocated under this grant would not be sufficient for those procurements. They'd have to kind of reimagine what their original plan was. Additionally, the money that funds OEM staff, the $1.4 million out of each grant, because of different extensions that have come out of COVID on these past grants, we're in a bit of a funny spot where our staffing levels are usually anywhere between January and April is when we can sustain funding. So I can look into an exact drop dead date for our office in terms of that, but there's a number of staff in the office funded by this grant that the funding from the previous grant year will end. And we ran up against that last year where we were down to the couple of pay periods left before the new money was accepted and uploaded into the system. So we don't want to have an interruption in pay for staff.
And what date was that, like for this upcoming year?
For this upcoming year, I can look into more specifics. It would be sometime in probably early February.
Okay. I mean, I ask because I do want to leave opportunity, I mean, obviously for my council colleagues to be able to, and ask any questions and do their own research. But I think there is a big component to this about the public having questions and wanting to also have time to discuss it with their district councilors and their councilors. So that's why I ask, and I appreciate the transparency, Andrew.
Absolutely. If I could just add one more thing. We do work on this constrained timeline pretty much every year, so if it's helpful for us to schedule something in advance next year, whether or not we have the grant, we're always open. We anticipate the grant on the same timeline. Sometimes the state is a little bit delayed. We're happy to have that conversation in November or December of the upcoming year, whether that's in advance of the council hearing or not, if that's helpful.
No, absolutely. I think it will be. So we'll be happy to work with you all to get that done. Great. So I'll turn it over to the second round of questions, starting with Councilor Flynn. Councilor Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Captain Connolly, has Boston ever been in violation of the Trust Act?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Thank you. And to the OEM team, are the cities and towns across Massachusetts that are part of this grant, are they waiting for us to provide leadership to get these funds allocated to them? Is that your understanding?
Certainly. So we make them well aware of the process that it takes to get from the federal government to the state government, then to us, and then out to the region. They often meet that with a little bit of chagrin that they want the money as soon as they can get it, so we try to speed that along. But we also respect the process in place in the city of Boston for accepting these funds. But yeah, the 8 other communities are often chomping at the bit this time of year to get us to pass it.
I spent considerable time last year at the same time, almost 3 weeks, advocating for support of this grant. I hope we're able to vote on this tomorrow and provide the leadership to cities and towns in Greater Boston and our partners. They're counting on Boston to provide the critical leadership that they've always provided. Captain Connolly, I have a follow-up question. Boston's bomb squad, did you mention that Boston's bomb squad is shared with we support other cities and towns in and around the region? Is
Yes,
that accurate?
That's accurate, sir.
Okay. And was there another duty that we help on as well? You mentioned the bomb squad, but was it?
I mentioned the SWAT team also.
Oh, yeah, the SWAT team, okay. And then, Captain, can you talk briefly about how important is it for your team, for the OEM team, for the Boston Police? How is it important for you to work with the Coast Guard that plays a critical role in Boston, but also certainly the Navy as well?
Yes, sir, I can speak to that, sir. Especially with the LNG transit that comes in every so often in Boston. That's a multi-jurisdiction, federal, state, local response. Boston Police being the Boston Harbor Master, of course. We have a command control component that goes to the Coast Guard to manage every time it comes in. We work under their direction with the state police. I know the state police brings in a helicopter for the transit, and we work with all our UASI partners as well with most of the marine vessels that were purchased through the UASI grant to close that capability gap, bringing those LNG vessels in, sir.
Thank you, Captain. And I guess my final question is, what is the role of civilians across the city when there's an emergency, or how are we preparing civilians to respond, to get engaged, to be active? I represent a lot of constituents in public housing. How are we ensuring that they're part of the discussion, that their voices are heard, and maybe they don't speak English? How are we communicating and ensuring that they're part of the process?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. The Regional Catastrophic Preparedness Grant was mainly focused on putting together all hazards public education material, and those are translated into all 11 languages, and they're currently building out the 2025 community engagement schedule to make sure that they're hitting every neighborhood and every neighborhood association as well across the city. Through the UASI grant, we also fund the Community Emergency Response Team program. So this was a program that had existed in Boston, and I believe it took got set aside for like 20 years, and we brought it back last year. And that really aims towards getting residents trained on how to help support during a disaster, and provides them with basic life safety skills and other ways that they can help support their neighbors and folks around them during an emergency, as well as during like major planned events, to help utilize them to help augment the volunteer workforce to work alongside us. So that's another program that I can share more information with you after this as well.
Excellent. My final question, maybe Captain, if you want to try to answer this. A lot of colleges and universities in and around Boston, but also greater Boston. What role do we play in working with colleges and universities, whether it's their security team, their facilities team, the Office of the President? How does that communication work?
One of the unique things that we have here in the Metro Boston region is an area-wide bike response, right? And that's made up of Boston Police Department, Mass State Police, our UASI partners, as well as the local colleges and universities. So they get this response, so they'll help us, and in turn, we help them respond to issues around the campuses as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the leadership you're providing the residents of the city. Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Weber, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I guess, so for, it's the $11.9 million grant. Do you know if is any of that money going to be used to pay for ShotSpotter, or whatever it's called now, SoundCloud, or? Sorry.
Sound thinking these
Sound
days.
thinking,
But
I was
we're trying to
close.
keep up as well.
Yeah.
So in this information that I'll send out to the council through the chair, as requested by Council President Lujan, in Goal Area 2.2 critical infrastructure, there is about $600,000 earmarked for the regional gunshot detection contract. Again, this is a contract that is currently held with Sound Thinking Technologies on behalf of the region. So the breakdown of which municipalities have certain square miles is all lumped into that contract. So Boston has a part of that contract, but it is lumped in with the region's contract for gunshot detection.
Okay, and then is that how it usually works? I thought we had a hearing just on ShotSpotter, and I thought does it usually come in through this grant?
There's two separate funding streams for Boston.
Okay, okay, and then do you have data on essentially, like, what percentage of the shot spotter alarms are correlated to actual gunfire?
I can provide you with that, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think there have been a number of studies that come out of Chicago and New York which show, you make of it what you will, but, 80+% being false alarms. I'm not, I don't have to get into a debate about whether, 10% is worth the 85, whatever, but, yeah, do you have anything?
I do know it worked as intended last night, sir.
Okay. And then, I guess, and I'm not sure you can answer this question, but in terms of the Boston Trust Act and this grant, so there's it's something called, it's Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act grants the Department of Homeland Security the ability to enter into agreements with law enforcement agencies to enforce immigration law. This provision is found across the country to sort of basically encourage racial profiling, and I know the number of agreements, 287G agreements, went down, but then first Trump administration increased them. I imagine they'll be looking to increase them before. If I guess, and it's not expressly prohibited by the Boston Trust Act. I read it as prohibiting it because it doesn't allow our police department to be used to, enforce immigration law or perform the functions of an immigration officer. But if the city entered into a 287G agreement, like would the city council be notified of that?
I'm not qualified to answer that question. I would have to speculate, so I want to make sure I get it to the right person and get back to you, sir.
Sure, and I guess my other question, which is just, does the Boston Police Department read the Boston Trust Act as prohibiting the city from entering into a 287G agreement?
I'm not sure. I would imagine they are, but I don't want to, again, it'd be speculation on my part.
Okay. Okay, sorry, so that's, I guess the last thing is, in terms of the $11.9 million grant, is any of that earmarked for purchase of new surveillance equipment? Do you know?
Not that I know of. I know again, you'll get this information following the meeting, but Winthrop is putting some security cameras in their emergency operations center. I believe those are internal, though. But in terms of Boston, I don't believe any is earmarked for additional surveillance equipment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Yield the rest of my time.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Weber. Council President Lujan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone for their questions that came before. How many times in the past year has BPD or BRIC shared information from the gang database with ICE, DHS, or the FBI?
I'm not qualified to answer that. Maybe the director can.
I see Director Walsh walking down. He knows. He knows that my questions are targeted. I think you could have answered that last one too, but that wasn't me, so I'll just let you do your thing. So yes, how many times in the last year has the BPD or BRIC shared information from the gang database with ICE, DHS, or the FBI?
So I will say that we're fully in compliance with the Trust Act. I'm not aware of any sharing of information related to civil immigration enforcement. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, though, of sort of law enforcement requests from those agencies.
Great. And I know that there's every year you file a Trust Act, a report pursuant to the Trust Act, and you file it with the City Council. I do think that this question is a little bit different than what is covered under the Trust Act, and I'd love to get that answer. And I think part of the reason and what causes confusion, rightfully so, to members of the public in general, is that BRIC is a regional fusion center that different agencies have access to. Is it correct to say that federal agencies have access to information that's in the BRIC?
I guess I would ask you to define further what you mean by access.
Okay, you're not a lawyer, but you're a good one. under what circumstances would a federal agency be able to access information that is in the BRIC, including the gang database?
So we receive a variety of requests from a variety of law enforcement and also non-law enforcement entities throughout the year. And we have a process that we go through to validate the reason that they're asking us for that information pursuant to an ongoing criminal investigation or a valid law enforcement purpose. And then we sort of evaluate that request against all of our local ordinances, state and federal laws, of course, and then only then do we ever provide information back to that entity once we've satisfied all of those requirements.
Okay, thank you. What MOUs exist between BRIC and federal agencies? Are there any MOUs that exist?
So we are party to, the department is party to an MOU regarding the Joint Terrorism Task Force that the BRIC directly supports. And I'm aware of several other task force related MOUs that are mostly housed out of our Bureau of Investigative Services.
Okay.
And I believe there's also an MOU with DHS, Office of Intelligence and Analysis.
Okay. I'm going to have some additional questions, but would BPD be willing to submit, you submit a Rule 335 report every year to the Boston Police Department, and it's an annual report where you talk about compliance with the gang assessment database, and it reads in part, BRIC will report by January 31st of each year to the police commissioner on the total number of individuals added to and purged from the database in the previous calendar year. These totals will then be released to the public. It's important because, again, when we harken back to that case in East Boston, the over-identification of Black and brown community members with the gang database, this is important for the council to know. And I know that it's a report that you file. Is there a possibility that that's a report that you could file with the city council at the same time that you file it with the commissioner?
Documenting, sorry.
Documenting reporting the people who are purged and added to the gang database.
Oh, certainly, I think we could include that.
Yeah, is that something that we're able to do without, I mean, I'm asking through the chair, that's something that you do at the same time? I'm not sure if there's anything that we need to do to codify that request, but I just want to make sure that.
I'd have to confirm the commissioner is comfortable, but certainly I can ask him.
Okay, thank you. How many individuals have requested redress or corrections of errors in the gang database in the past 5 years?
The past 5 years, I'm not aware of off the top of my head. I believe this year we've received approximately 5 redress requests.
Right. And Director, we've talked about making sort of the information about how to access whether you're on the database and how to remove yourself on the database, making that more accessible. Where are we in that process?
Certainly. So we've been going through our annual sort of policy update process as we do every year. One of the updates that we're looking to make to the privacy policy is to add an email address for our privacy officer so that members of the public could submit their requests. Currently, it's sort of by mail or through other mechanisms, but we are looking to make an email address available for folks to submit more easily electronically directly. We've always received requests via email through different mechanisms to BPD's Office of the Legal Advisor and different things like that, but we're looking to make a specific address available for this.
A specific email. And is there a place on a website somewhere where folks know that this is an option available to them, and what is that?
It's posted on a couple places on the department webpage, under the Bureaus tab on the new BPD webpage. It's been posted publicly, for the BRIC's entire existence, but it's up there currently, and then that version gets updated. So it's at least posted there, and then it may be a couple other places. At one point, the National Fusion Center Association hosted a webpage that had all of Fusion Center privacy policies on it. I could double check to make sure that that's still active. But
Okay. Thank you, Director Rush. That's my time. I have a few more questions I'm going to refine, and then I'm going to ask you them after.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President. Councilor Galera Zapata, you have the floor.
There we go. I'm going to keep it simple. I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Galera Zapata. All right, I do want to give an opportunity, just if anyone has any final questions, just please turn on your mic, and you can feel free to ask them. Okay. Councilor Flynn? You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know I asked Captain Conley if Boston was ever in violation of the Trust Act. And I know it seems like no, but I wanted to give you guys some OEM. Do you have any updates on, do you know if Boston's ever been in violation? I want to give you a chance to answer as well.
No, we don't have any information about that.
The director up there, up at the top. I just want to be sure and get it on the record if we were in violation or we're not in violation.
Certainly, Councilor, I'm not aware of any violations of the Trust Act.
Okay. What would the process be if Boston was in violation, or if they were being investigated for a violation? Just walk us through that process. How would that work?
So I can say we do annual training on several different ordinances, state, federal laws, our privacy policy for all personnel in the BRIC I can speak to directly. And were we to find any violations in that process or just kind of in our day-to-day work, we would certainly, report that up the chain appropriately and, see what types of, certainly I think we would start with, additional training, making sure that everyone sort of understood their responsibilities under the ordinance, and then kind of escalating it through BPD's, Bureau of Professional Standards if we needed to go that route.
Is the training ongoing for all Boston police officers and civilians to ensure that they're always in compliance with the Trust Act?
I believe so.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Council President Eugene, you have the floor.
Thank you. So thank you to my staff too that got me the Trust Act report last year, because that's sort of where I wanted to base my questions on, because it says no later than December 31st, the commissioner shall submit a report to the clerk of the city council reporting on a statistical breakdown of the total number of civil immigration detainer requests lodged with the city's law enforcement officials, organized by the reasons given for the request. And when we look at the actual report, that the reasons were given for the civil immigration removal of someone, and it's a list of 19 civil requests, and it was not acted upon per the Boston Trust Act ordinance, which is great. And again, I'll say the BPD has done a great job complying with the Boston Trust Act. The reason why my question is different is because the requests coming from ICE, FBI, or federal agencies sometimes aren't always with respect to what's governed and covered by the Trust Act. And so you get requests from the FBI for a number of, whether it's counterterrorism, whether it's for someone who's alleged to have been involved in criminal activity, which would not be covered by the Trust Act. And so those are the ones that I'm trying to get a sense of what the requests are for those. And that's why we asked about ICE, DHS, and the FBI. A fear is the reasons given. People can get creative with what those reasons are. And so I'd like to have an understanding of and this is outside of the Trust Act, which is why this was an independent, standalone question. I mean, if we don't have it now, through the chair, would love to get it in the future, of what it has looked like. How many times in the past year has BPD or BRIC shared information from the gang database with ICE, and the difference is ICE HSI, right, versus the ICE arm that's responsible for civil detainment, and DHS or the FBI, right, and that's outside of the Trust Act. I'd like to get an understanding of that, to know what is normal for projections in the future, right? And so I think that's why it's important information for this body to have. Let's just say over the past 4 years, what those requests have looked like, and for what purpose. They could be broad categories, but I think it's important for this council to know, because people will likely get creative on their requests that come to the BRIC. And whose discernment will it be, whether it's for civil detainment removal, or if they say it's because there's, criminal activity happening? Who makes that determination?
So I will say we always maintain the right and the ability to not respond to any request that we receive, and we do actively deny requests where we are either unsure or not confident enough in the reason that the requester is asking, or certainly if we had any information to suggest that they were not being truthful or acting in good faith with us. I will say that we generally do believe that other law enforcement agencies act in good faith and are guided by legal and other principled actions when they make a request of us. I will fully admit that we do have that faith generally for our law enforcement community, but we do validate that they are a valid law enforcement entity, and we do ask additional questions usually around, for looking for case numbers and things that kind of give more sense that there is a valid criminal investigation going on around the request. And then we also, I would say, we try to make sure we're only providing the requester, with the limited set of information that they're really looking for. We're not trying to provide, large, data exchanges to these entities in response to requests.
Thank you, but it is up, so it's up to your discretion to respond to these federal agencies and how?
100%.
Even okay with federal funding. And again, I just want to uplift that ICE, HSI, when we're talking about human smuggling, trafficking, narcotics, and weapon smuggling and trafficking, like those are outside of the bounds of the Trust Act. I can see someone alleging they're criminal, this is criminal activity, and that not being the case. And I want to make sure that we have enough safeguards in place, whether that be our discretion or otherwise, and I don't want to, discretion is a hard thing to trust sometimes, so that's why I'm requesting through the chair, for us to get a sense of those requests, what have been filled, what have been denied, what have been the reasons for the requests and for the denials. I'd love that information, so via the chair, I'd like to request that from
Certainly.
PPD. Okay, thank you. And then my last question is actually not for you, so
Very good, thank you.
Captain, I think I heard you state that there's a new drone that flies indoors that we have used some of the UASI money to purchase. Is that correct? Did I mishear that?
Yes, Madam President, you did. The Boston Fire Department purchased one. I'm not sure of the name of the drone, but I know it has capability of flying indoors. They use it a lot for search and rescue, urban search and rescue, to either have a recovery mission or a rescue mission.
Okay, so that's via BFD, but it is also used, the UASI funds, I know, are targeted towards the fire department as well.
Yeah, so that was the way I was trying to show that first responders showing up to something with the different tools that they purchased through UASI, how it can all be pulled together to resolve problems and issues and close capability gaps that we currently are faced with.
Okay, do you know, is that a new technology that would be required to be revealed through the oversight ordinance?
I wouldn't define it as new technology. I think it's old technology. I just think it's smaller and it's more robust. So they make them now where they can break glass and fly into buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Council President, Councilor Weber, are you all set? Okay, great. With that, also you do, okay. Councilor Weber, you have the floor.
Okay. I guess there's comments today in the media about, cities like Boston are sort of encouraging, I think, fentanyl dealers and people to commit sex crimes. I mean, can you just respond, Captain, to, we're still enforcing criminal law here in the city of Boston, even though, we're trying to prevent our police department from being used to enforce federal immigration law?
That's correct, sir. Yes, we enforce criminal law, yes.
Okay, and yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Weber. Just want to make sure Councilors will let us about that you're all set. Yep. Okay. I do have one final question. I think it might be for Director Walsh. I'm sorry to make you walk up and down so many times. But
yeah.
This is a hypothetical.
Just trying to get my steps in.
Bear with me with this hypothetical situation here, but, assuming it was a criminal offense, so that's first, right? If the federal government passed a law banning wearing blue shirts and BRIG received a request for information on a person being investigated for wearing a blue shirt, would the BRIG comply with this request?
I certainly hesitate to speculate on a
Assuming it's
hypothetical.
a criminal offense.
I believe that violations of federal laws would count in our sort of evaluation process if that was a federal law that was being violated criminally.
Great.
I guess I would say.
Right. Thank you, Director Ross. That was my question. All right. With that, I would like to provide.
Sorry, Council.
Council President, you have the floor, and it might be for Director Ross.
Yeah. It's because your hypothetical was that's like actually a very solid hypothetical. What about in the case of someone violating an abortion law in like Texas or Florida or another state, and that's considered a crime? Like, what safeguards do we have, or is that in the wheelhouse of discretion?
So at the state level, I believe I would say that's in the wheelhouse of our discretion, and our current, I wouldn't speak for the BPD legal advisor's opinion here. We would certainly seek advice from them in that scenario, but I believe we would likely not comply with that request.
Okay, thank you. It would be great. We talked about the MOUs that exist, and I think you mentioned the counterterrorism one. Are those MOUs that the council has access to, can have access to, can be made part of the record?
I believe so.
So I think I've asked a lot through the chair, but I'd like to add that one if the MOUs can be made part of the record.
Absolutely. We'll make that request, Council President.
Okay, thank you. And you leave me a lot to think about in terms of like the bandwidth for what discretion looks like, especially in a case like in a situation such as that, which leaves me with a little bit of trepidation in terms of what guardrails we're placing around. What do we want to mandate certain things rather than leave them to discretion? Thank you.
I would say certainly, Council President, that we would seek guidance from the commissioner and our leadership internally within Boston Police Department. And I would also just want to say, while the grant is regional, we view that our leadership is within the Boston Police Department. The commissioner is sort of the final decision maker. We don't take into account other towns' opinions on these different topics necessarily when responding to a request. So we would follow the guidance from the commissioner and BPD's legal advisor and the city law officials, if it were to come down to that, us versus one of the other regional agencies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for indulging my final question. I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you again to all of the work that you do and for taking the council's questions at this late hour. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to just, before I dismiss you, just want to give you an opportunity for any final remarks that you may want to put into the record.
Yes, I just want to say why this matters for Boston, right? Boston faces a unique set of threats, including terrorism, cyber security risks, and the need to protect crowded public spaces. The URC grant ensures that Boston and its regional partners remain prepared, proactive, and resilient in the face of these challenges. Programs supported by URC funding have a proven track record of success, making Boston a model for public safety and homeland security. And the fiscal year 2024 URC grant is an investment in Boston's safety and future. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Chair, Madam President, and council members, thank you.
Thank you, Captain. And, thank you to this panel for indulging us in so many questions. So I really appreciate you all being here. All right. With that,
thanks for the opportunity.
Are dismissed. We will now move forward with public testimony. Central staff has informed me that there are members of the public signed up to testify, so we will move forward with that. When your name is called, if you are here in person, please come to one of the podiums at the back of the room and speak into the microphone. Or if you are on Zoom, please unmute yourself. Please state your name, neighborhood, and/or organization affiliation, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. So I have Alex Matthews, followed up with Melissa DeSanto. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your names, but those are the two that we'll start with, and then I think we also have some virtual signups. So Alex, good to see you. Thank you for being here. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Santana. My name is Alex Matthews. I am the chair of Digital Fourth. I am a resident of Belmont, Massachusetts, and Digital Fourth is a civil liberties organization with members in Boston and the surrounding communities. I would like to state that for many of the uses in the grants that you've been discussing this afternoon, we have no objection to them at all. We have no objection to grants for EMS or for preventing WMDs or improvements to maritime communications or for extreme weather resilience. These are all good things. We have written testimony. There have also been letters from residents that support what we support here, which is a delay of consideration of this grant. This item must be delayed, first because, as we have seen from this hearing, it is not the case that all councillors have received a line item breakdown and have had time to review it. It is not the case that a line item breakdown has been made available to the public. And the fault for that information not having been provided lies with JPOC and lies with Boston PD. They had the chance to do this, and if it is as critical in timing as they say, they ought to have provided reasonable information to the council ahead of time instead of doing this rushed process. Second, despite the discussion that we've had this afternoon and the excellent questions from council, we do not yet know for sure whether there is any existing surveillance technology approved by this grant that is being used in a new purposeful manner. And we need to know that in order to know whether the terms of the surveillance ordinance are to be triggered. There is no hurry on these funds. We are aware from JPOC's own discussion that prior year money has not been dispersed yet, and JPOC has authority to reallocate between line items and has money outstanding in those accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Melissa? Melissa DeSanto, yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'll make this brief. I actually have questions. I'm wondering if the city councilors can maybe take note and ask some of these folks. Councilor Flynn, I really thank you for pressing those questions about the crime lab and the Y screening and the everything else like that. And I hope there's actually another hearing on it. I know I came to a hearing here on June 16, 2022, and hardly anyone of the panelists had any information and data. So it was really encouraging to hear Miss Maria Cheevers. She's kind of starstruck because she actually took it seriously. Like 2 years ago, it was about sexual assault in Boston Public Schools and asking for data, and city councilors were here laughing like it was a joke. But I do have some questions. I just want to, first, number one, how are we increasing the line item, the budget for Operation Hoodsie Cup? Because who doesn't love ice cream? My second question is, has COVID as a virus itself posed any specific challenges and implementations of the efficacy of Y screening, considering that COVID is believed to, or it's been shown to change this serological behavior in people's, and how does that change DNA profiles? The second one was regarding, there's been a number of incidents in the past 4 years regarding dog attacks, and Boston police officers having to respond to them, sometimes having to put the animals down. So between Boston Fire Department getting cats out of trees with the extension ladders, the Mass Environmental Police, and animal control, how is it that residents are suffering fatalities, people are losing their pets, or and city employees are getting attacked? So how is that coordinated? And I think what was the third question? Question number 3, has former Mayor Marty Welsh been taken out of the BRIC database? Because apparently in 2014 he was in there. And does that implicate anybody as far as Boston City Council, if you guys are a gang? And I think the last question was, yeah, that was it. If you could just ask those when you guys get a chance. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. We're now going to move to virtual signups. I've been told that there are 2 people who are signed up to virtually testify. With us, we have Heather Arroyo and Fatima Ahmed. We're going to start with Heather, and then we're going to go with Fatima. Heather, do we have you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you okay. You have 2 minutes. Thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Heather Arroyo. I'm a senior immigration attorney at the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute and also a resident and voter in Jamaica Plain. At Mass Law Reform, we have a coalition of over 400 legal service providers who serve the immigrant community. The UASI grant, which includes a substantial amount of funding for BRIC and other police surveillance programs, should not be put forward for a vote tomorrow. If it is, we are urging the City Council to vote no. This is nearly $12 million to surveil Black and brown residents of Boston with a hearing one day before the vote. There are not enough safeguards in place. There has not been enough community input. There are so many people missing from the conversation today. The council should want to hear from our members, our coalition partners, and the community as a whole on the harms of BRIC. With the hearing a day before the vote, that's just not possible. And to rush through this process without meaningful opportunity for feedback would disregard the privacy and civil rights of Bostonians at a time when the need to protect privacy, civil rights, and to be intentional about racial and immigrant justice is at an all-time high. The incoming Trump administration has already promised to conduct mass deportations, including those who are U.S. citizens. We were talking about a president-elect who just 2 days ago reaffirmed that his plan is to deport everybody who is undocumented over the next 4 years, saying, quote, "You have to do it and you have no choice." He will use every tool that he has, and to think that he will not use federally funded programs to meet this agenda is a mistake. We as a city should not voluntarily be a part of this plan. They say that their information is not shared, but as an immigration attorney, I know that it has been shared with DHS. In my experience, DHS has not only known who is in the gang database, they know who used to be on it. My client was removed from the gang database, but DHS still used the fact that he used to be on it against him, and it resulted in his deportation last year. These are the exact types of concerns that our communities should be heard on, and for those reasons, we urge the Boston City Council to vote no on docket number 1673. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Heather. Appreciate you joining us. Next up, we have Fatima Ahmed.
Hi, I'm Fatima. I'm Executive Director of Muslim Justice League. I'm also a Boston resident, and I want to express, gratitude to the counselors who are asking questions of BRIC and acknowledging that so many community members reached out on very short notice, because we all received very short notice of this grant, being put up for today's hearing and being put up for a vote tomorrow. So also really frustrated that this would be, that this is attempted to be, rushed through, given over a decade of organizing and community concerns that have been shared again and again. And this council has expressed many of those concerns and should really take seriously trying to rush through a grant like this when we're facing, exponentially increased surveillance and policing coming up after the inauguration. As you just heard from Heather, immigration attorneys have said again and again that this has led to deportations. In fact, 2 other attorneys just wrote in the Boston Globe about how between 2014 to 2017, 135 children had their information shared from BRIC to ICE. Not all of those lead to deportations that you're hearing about, but all of these things have led to harm in the community. And it's not just about immigration enforcement. I think that is obviously taking, a spotlight in this moment, because we know that we're hearing of mass deportations that are planned, and we know what that has looked like in the past. But as other folks have mentioned, right, BRIC has also surveilled activists for quite some time, from Occupy Boston to Black Lives Matter. Also, just Muslims using Arabic terms on social media have been part of, BRIC surveillance. I will say in the past 14 months, our organization has been busy fighting a genocide. And while we have been busy doing that, BRIC has been busy sending essentially daily reports about the protests and events of not only our organization, but many of our partner organizations like Jewish organizations, Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now Boston, and students on campuses, which we also know how BPD ended up responding to students on campuses, particularly Emerson and Northeastern University, but especially what happened at Emerson, which many of you, expressed concerns about. We know, as they mentioned earlier, that they have been working with campuses, and we think that that deserves so much more, conversation. We have also been busy in the past year actually doing research on BRIC because BRIC has not given you all that transparency, because this has been a concern for so long. We have been taking that upon ourselves to do that. That report is not finalized.
Very quickly.
Yeah, we would love to meet with you all to go over those key findings, including the expenditures from the UASI grant that is before you today. But urging you, Councillor Santana, to please postpone this.
Thank you for coming and testifying. Kay, do you want to testify? Yeah, absolutely. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Kate Crockford from the ACLU of Massachusetts. Really appreciate the counselors who are still here. Thank you guys for sticking it out on a late Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. So we have a lot of concerns about these issues at the ACLU, foremost among them what Fatima was just mentioning about the Boston Police Department's long, ugly history of spying on people for their, protected First Amendment expression, speech, and association, and also concerns about the BPD sharing information about people's protected speech and association with the federal government, with the FBI, others, DHS, et cetera. Also want to echo the comments Fatima made about how, we've heard a lot from counselors today about concerns related to the Trust Act and sharing information pertaining to immigration enforcement. The Trust Act really is quite limited to information sharing that's relevant to the enforcement of civil immigration law. And I think the council ought to look much broader than that when it considers what the BRIC is doing in terms of information sharing with the federal government and with out-of-state agencies. I was really troubled to hear the director of the BRIC say earlier that the Boston Police Department assumes good faith when they receive information requests from out-of-state and federal law enforcement agencies. I don't think that's appropriate in an environment in which almost half of states have criminalized abortion, as the council president mentioned a few minutes ago. When we see numerous and growing, frankly, attacks on transgender Americans across the country in many states through the legislatures, legal attacks, and in an environment when we are about to witness a federal administration coming in who has pledged to target his political enemies with arrest and prosecution. And so this is a new environment. We're not in 1992 anymore. We are dealing with rising fascist sentiment. We are dealing with laws that criminalize the bodily autonomy of human beings in many parts of this country. And those laws are being enforced through police powers. And so I really think it's important for this council, for the administration, and for the police department to start to look beyond mere civil immigration enforcement when it comes to scrutinizing the practices of the Boston Police Department with respect to its collection and sharing of information. We strongly believe that the BPD should not be voluntarily sharing information about people's First Amendment protected activity unless it's directly connected to a crime that is a crime in Boston. We believe that the Boston Police Department should not be sharing information with outside law enforcement agencies that may pertain to the provision of health care that's lawful here in Boston. These are really important issues that this council and this administration have thus far failed to adequately address. And so, we understand that time is tight. You are likely to, you're going to do what you're going to do on this grant. It's my recommendation that you wait and, hear more about some of these issues before making a decision. No matter what you do on this question related to this particular grant, I would ask that this council continue these conversations and maybe even step into a lawmaking role to improve some protections with respect to how the Boston Police Department collects sensitive information about people's political expression and activities, and then shares that information and information about healthcare and immigration-related issues with outside entities outside of Massachusetts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate you testifying. At this time, I just want to thank the panelists, members of the public, my colleagues, and central staff for your participation and assistance with today's hearing. This hearing on dockets number 1545, 1546, 1548, 1622, 1673, 1675, 1676, 1680, 1681, 1770, and 1772 is adjourned.